Humph. Facing the devastating attacks all around him, Zheng Yang didn't panic. Instead, a smile crept onto his lips. Finally, he ignored the attacks and leaped into the sky instead. What is he doing? He will only expose more openings in the sky and hasten his loss. If he attempts to escape at this point, he will only be cornering himself further. Is he trying to admit defeat? Even though he will be able to avoid the attacks for the time being through his move, he will only be exposing himself to even more danger in a moment. This is truly a failed move. A commotion broke out amid the crowd. Zheng Yang had displayed incredible battle sense and outstanding maneuvers throughout the course of the battle, awing everyone, so why would he make such a fatal flaw in this crucial moment? Chrysalis Realm cultivators were incapable of flight, and if he had remained on the ground, he might still have stood a chance against the combat masters. The inability of Chrysalis Realm cultivators to maneuver adeptly in the air only meant that he would become an easy target for his opponents to strike. Before innumerable shocked gazes, Zheng Yang moved horizontally in the air to dodge all of the attacks heading for him before charging downwards with his spear. Is he flying? How can a Chrysalis Realm cultivator fly? Everyone was stunned. Only a half-saint who had opened their Zhukong acupoint was capable of flying freely in the sky. The young man before them was just a Chrysalis Realm cultivator, so how could he maneuver so freely in the air? Wang Ying chuckled. It seems like teacher has taught him the red dust heaven ascending steps as well. Their teacher had been able to fly in the air freely despite being at transcendent mortal realm because he had cultivated this movement technique. Clearly, Zheng Yang had inherited that technique as well. Zheng Yang is indeed rather sharp. He knows that under normal circumstances, he wouldn't be able to stand against their strongest moves. Thus, he chose to intentionally display an opening to focus everyone's attacks on him, but making use of the conventional notion that Chrysalis Realm cultivators are incapable of flight, he caught them off guard and easily averted the crisis while turning the situation on them at the same time. Those three are done for, Lu Yang said with a smile. It was a common notion among cultivators that those beneath Chrysalis Realm were weak in the air because they were incapable of flight, and it was making use of this notion that Zheng Yang had been able to earn an opportunity to strike. Before Lu Yang could finish his words, Zheng Yang's spear transformed into innumerable bursts of light that shot forth from the sky, barraging the three combat masters on the stage. Pang! 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 Under the relentless assault, the faces of the three combat masters paled as they were knocked back, and two even fell straight off the stage. It seems like I have won. Holding his spear, Zheng Yang stood upright on the stage as he shot a sweeping gaze at his surroundings with an indomitable disposition. Many had thought that he would fall at the dragon's back, but he had managed to clear it successfully. After clearing this section, Zheng Yang didn't rush ahead. Instead, he sat cross-legged on the ground and swallowed a pill to recover his stamina and depleted jinqi. Upon seeing his actions, the surroundings immediately fell silent so as not to disturb his recuperation. Beneath the stage, Liao Song clenched his fists tightly as his face reddened in agitation. The fact that Zheng Yang had successfully cleared the dragon's back bore testimony to his strength. As long as he trained diligently after entering the Combat Master Hall, he would surely be able to become a captain at the very least in the future. To have discovered such an expert, he would surely be able to rise through the ranks. Even if Zheng Yang failed to clear the final dragon's head, he would still benefit greatly from this matter. Zheng Yang rested for a whole hour before standing up. At this point, the energy coursing through his body had reached a new peak. As if a powerful storm had been raised within his body, the deep rumbling of thunder could be vaguely heard from within his body. With every step he took forward, the aura he emanated grew stronger and sharper by a bit. By the 8th step, a loud buzz sounded, and his cultivation advanced from Chrysalis Realm primary stage to intermediate stage. He is advancing his cultivation right before the battle. Wu Tianqiong was astonished. He turned his gaze to Liao Song and asked, "Will the combat masters in the dragon's head adjust their cultivation accordingly?" The opponents in the dragon's tail, dragon's back, and Dragon's Head of the Dragon Gate formation were scaled according to the cultivation of the challenger. Given that Zhen Yang had achieved a breakthrough, would the opponents behind adjust the difficulty of the challenge according to the present circumstances? They won't. There is a time limit of 2 hours to the trial, and achieving a breakthrough within this limited time can be considered a method of adaptation by the cultivator. It won't cause any difference to the difficulty of the later trials, Liao Song replied. If a challenger was able to achieve a breakthrough within the duration of the Dragon Gate formation, it would be attributed to the challenger's own capability as well. As such, no adjustments would be made. Besides, a breakthrough by a cultivation stage wouldn't make much of a difference to the trial. After all, there was no way one could achieve a breakthrough by an entire cultivation realm within 2 hours. While they were speaking, Zhen Yang continued walking. By the 11th step, he had already managed to reinforce his chrysalis realm intermediate stage cultivation fully. Proceeding ahead, the Jinqi in his body began rumbling once more, just like before, and his aura continued to grow stronger. Boom! By the 19th step, he overcame his bottleneck and successfully reached chrysalis realm advanced stage. This! Everyone's eyebrows leaped up. As cultivators, they had seen many breakthroughs throughout their lives, but they had never seen a person making consecutively breakthroughs so quickly. To make 2 breakthroughs while walking a little more than a dozen steps, this was inconceivable. On top of that, Zhen Yang was showing no signs of stopping yet. As he continued walking forward, the energy in his body continued to rumble furiously. By the time he reached the Dragon's Head, his cultivation had already reached chrysalis realm pinnacle. Wang Ying smiled. Over the past few days, Zhen Yang has accumulated a vast amount of Jinqi, but he chose to suppress his cultivation until this moment. Finally, his hard work has paid off. Back when Zhen Yang received news that he was going to take the assessment to become a combat master, he worked harder than ever on his cultivation, but he chose to suppress it despite already being able to achieve a breakthrough. The purpose of it was so as to allow him to swiftly reach higher realms in the middle of a battle and catch his opponent off guard. Of course, the main reason he was able to do so was also due to the unique nature of the cultivation technique that his teacher had imparted to him. For normal cultivators, it would already have been incredible if they advanced a cultivation stage on the spot. Due to the capacity of their dantian, they were incapable of storing sufficient Jinqi to make multiple breakthroughs on the spot. This move of his is not bad, he has lessened the gap between him and the combat masters in the Dragon's Head. Perhaps I should try the same when I challenge the trial later on, Lu Yang remarked with a smile. Zhen Yang didn't rush to attack the combat masters of the Dragon's Head. Instead, he flicked his wrist and popped a scarlet fruit into his mouth. That is, the scarlet firefly fruit. Beneath the stage, Wu Su and Lu Qing recognized the item that Zhen Yang had just ingested, and their eyes narrowed in alarm. Back then, they had gone to a valley in order to procure that fruit, only to leave empty-handed. All along, they had suspected that Zhang Xian had taken it before them, and from the looks of it now, that was indeed the case. The scarlet firefly fruit was known for its effect of enhancing a cultivator's chances of achieving a breakthrough to half-saint. That fellow on the stage had already advanced his cultivation by 3 stages. It couldn't be that he still wanted to make the breakthrough to half-saint on top of that. There was huge gap between chrysalis realm and half-saint. If one were to succeed, there would be a qualitative leap in one's fighting prowess. By then, given his combat capability, clearing the Dragon's Head would be a walk in the park. Wu Su and Lu Qing weren't the only ones who noticed this. Having come to the same conclusion as well, Liao Song bellowed, "Strike the army while it's crossing the river." Hung long long. Upon hearing the bellow, the 3 combat masters in the Dragon's Head immediately raised their weapons and charged at Zhen Yang. In any case, the other party was already in their area of battle, so it wasn't against the rules for them to make a move. It just so happens that I could use some help digesting this surge of energy. I will use you all to practice my spear. Zhen Yang's eyebrows shot up as he raised his spear to retaliate. Typically speaking, the scarlet firefly fruit would require at least 2 to 4 hours to digest, but if one were to be pressured in battle, the speed could be hastened significantly. Back then, during the Master-Teacher tournament in the Myriad Kingdom Alliance, Zhang Xian had used the same method to raise his transcendent mortal for Dan clarifying turbidity realms cultivation swiftly. Under normal circumstances, it would be nigh impossible for Zhen Yang to defeat the dragon's head. However, with the scarlet firefly fruit, his chances would be boosted manyfold. And as expected, the more he clashed with the combat masters, the greater the energy within his body became. In this moment, it was as if he had become a tireless machine of perpetual motion. Not only so, his cultivation was swiftly progressing to half-saint. After trading around 100 blows, a crisp echo sounded from his body, and his fighting prowess suddenly went through a qualitative change and surged exponentially. Half-saint, reached. Upon reaching half-saint, Zhen Yang's fighting prowess had more than doubled. With his newfound strength, the 3 combat masters of the dragon's head whom he had struggled against just a moment ago were no longer a match for him. Within 10 blows, he had already knocked them off the stage with his spear. Dragon Gate formation, cleared. He, really succeeded. Clenching his fists in agitation, Liao Song could hardly believe what he was seeing. A feat that countless geniuses in the Combat Master Hall had failed to achieve, and yet, this 16 or 17-year-old youth who wasn't even a master teacher had actually cleared it so easily. This was inconceivable. Cleared. The will from the headquarters supervising the Dragon Gate formation from the sky left behind this word before gradually fading. In other words, the result of this trial was recognized by the Combat Master Hall headquarters. In the future, if Zhen Yang were to head to the Combat Master Hall headquarters, he could challenge the Dragon's Pearl directly without undergoing the previous 3 sections. While this wasn't the complete Dragon Gate formation, over the span of the past 300 years, there were less than 10 combat masters who had successfully cleared this trial. To be even more direct, at this very moment, Zhen Yang had already become a candidate to become the progeny of combat. Clenching his fists tightly, tears began to stream down Zhen Yang's cheeks. I have succeeded. He was only an ordinary youth who had a passion for spearmanship. Had he not met his teacher, he probably would have remained in Tianxian Kingdom his entire life, unaware of the greater world out there. His cultivation would have been capped at Tongxian realm, and he might have become a spearmanship teacher for other cultivators. He would have spent the 100 years of his life humbly and idly, achieving nothing significant at all, leaving nothing worthy of note when he was reduced to dust at the end of his life. It was his teacher who had changed his life, showing him that the world was greater than what he could see. It was his teacher who had brought him to where he was, reaching a height that he dared not imagine in the past. It was his teacher who had given him confidence in a goal, teaching him what he should fight for. Clenching his fists tightly, Zhen Yang made a vow. Teacher, don't worry. I will surely advance further and further. I will make a name out of myself in the Combat Master Hall so as to not let you down. As Zhen Yang walked down the stage, Liao Song turned his gaze to Wang Ying and the others. Alright. Now that Zhen Yang has cleared the trial, do the rest of you still want to give it a try? Of course. Wang Ying smiled. Even if she didn't become a combat master, she wished to show the world her strength and bring glory to her teacher's name. Wang Ying was just about to leap onto the stage when she heard a slightly soft and gentle voice from the side. Senior, why don't you allow me to try first? I am the most junior of us, so if I am able to clear the trial, you will surely be able to do the same. Turning around, she saw a pair of eyes looking at her with a brilliant gleam within. Wei Ruyan. This is a famous saying by Zhuo Qiuming in the spring and autumn period of Chinese history. It is a warfare strategy, which can be translated into strike the enemy while they are unprepared. The rationale behind the saying is that the forces that are already on the other side of the river will be weak, and the forces that are still crossing will be intimidated by the enemies, thus resulting in chaos. Fighter 7 Dan. You? Wang Ying frowned. Even though they were all direct disciples of Zhang Laoshi, Wei Ruyan had only joined 2 months ago, and the guidance she had received from Zhang Xian was limited. A normal combat master assessment wouldn't pose much of a problem to her, but the Dragon Gate formation was likely beyond her means for now. After all, even Zhen Yang had needed to use some tricks and put in quite a bit of effort before he could succeed. If he hadn't suppressed his cultivation and pushed for a breakthrough in the midst of his battle, it would have been nearly impossible for him to defeat the dragon's head. Even though it hasn't been long since I came under teacher's lineage, I hope to give it a try, Wei Ruyan said resolutely. This wasn't a decision she had made on the spur of the moment but something she had decided upon long ago. Seeing that Wei Ruyan was determined, Wang Ying nodded. All right then. Be careful. If you find yourself in any danger, surrender immediately. Thank you, senior. Wei Ruyan replied before leaping onto the stage. Is this lady Principal Zhang's direct disciple as well? Upon seeing Wei Ruyan going onto the stage, doubtful expressions surfaced on the faces of the students and teachers of the Hongyuan Master Teacher Academy. Wang Ying, Zhen Yang, and Lu Yang were guest elders in the academy, so it was natural that the students and teachers had heard of them. On the other hand, Wei Ruyan had never appeared in public before. Furthermore, she had a particularly weak physique, which indicated that she wasn't an active person, so was she really suited to challenge the Dragon Gate formation? I heard that she is a student that Principal Zhang accepted 2 months ago. 2 months ago? So short. That's right. Some who were aware of the matter whispered among the crowd, sharing the news around. Principal Zhang was formidable, but it seemed impossible, even for him, to train a student whom he had accepted only 2 months earlier to a standard capable of clearing the trial. On top of that, Principal Zhang had been outside for most of the past 2 months due to his 6-star master teacher examination, only returning a few days prior. Even if he had made time for some lessons with Wei Ruyan, the amount of time they would have had together was still severely limited. Was that really sufficient for her to clear such a difficult trial? After all, the Dragon Gate formation was at least 10-fold more difficult than the combat master selection before. After checking Wei Ruyan's cultivation, Liao Song said, "Your cultivation is at Chrysalis Realm Pinnacle, so going by that, the opponents you will be facing will have cultivations ranging from Chrysalis Realm Pinnacle to Nascent Saint Pinnacle." Of the group who had assessed Zhen Yang, even though one had been impaled by his spear, there were still others who could substitute for the wounded. As for the others, while they had been wounded in the confrontation, those were just light wounds, and they had mostly recovered. It wasn't a problem for them to go another round. Thus, they were still able to make up the 9 members required for the Dragon Gate formation. All right. Wei Ruyan nodded. Had Zhen Yang not achieved the consecutive breakthroughs, she would have been the one with the highest cultivation among Zhang Xian's direct disciples. At the current moment, she was just a step away from reaching half-saint. An hour later, the preparation for the Dragon Gate formation was finally done. Liao Song turned to Wei Ruyan and said, "All right, you can begin." Wei Ruyan nodded, and her eyes immediately turned grim. At the same time, her mind became incredibly composed, unperturbed by anything in her surroundings. Tortured by her affliction for so many years, she had matured far beyond her age. In terms of mental resilience, even Lu Chong couldn't compare with her. In face of difficult situations, she could maintain her composure and not panic. Voila! With the start of the trial, the 3 combat masters began to drive their Zhenqi, and a powerful might burst forth from them, creating an immense pressure on their opponent. Wei Ruyan pushed her feet against the ground and dashed right toward them. She isn't going to use any weapons? Seeing Wei Ruyan rushing toward the dragon's tail unarmed, the crowd couldn't help but frown. Even with a spear in hand, Zhen Yang had found it relatively tough to deal with the Dragon Gate formation. Considering that Wei Ruyan was a delicate lady, how could she defeat the powerful combat masters barehanded? She just started cultivating 2 months ago, so she hasn't learned how to wield any weapons yet, Wang Ying explained with a bitter smile. Just started cultivating 2 months ago. Wu Tianqiong widened his eyes in shock. She has been ill from a young age, and it was only 2 months ago that our teacher successfully treated her affliction and accepted her as his direct disciple. It was then that she first started cultivating, Wang Ying replied. She only started cultivating 2 months ago and is unable to use any weapon. How is she supposed to win like that? Wu Tianqiong nearly fainted on the spot. They had all seen with his own eyes how fearsome the Dragon Gate formation was. For a cultivator who had just started cultivating 2 months ago and couldn't even wield a weapon properly to rush right in. Are you here to play? Hearing those words, Liao Song's lips also twitched. The Dragon Gate formation is a trial that countless combat masters have challenged only to fail. Do you all really think that it is that simple to clear? Pang! 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 While the group was speaking, Wei Ruyan had already begun clashing with the 3 combat masters of the Dragon's Tail. Upon seeing their fight, Liao Song's cheeks began to twitch. She doesn't know any battle techniques? To his astonishment, the young lady's movements were extremely crude, as if she had never learned even the most basic of fist arts before. She was simply flailing her arms around erratically with all the strength she could muster, a clear indication of an amateur. Anyone who had learned the slightest bit of a battle technique would never utilize such crude movements. Battle techniques. In the past 2 months, she has been busy reinforcing her cultivation, and teacher also hasn't had any time to teach her a battle technique yet, Wang Ying said awkwardly. From the moment she woke up, Wei Ruyan had been a chrysalis realm cultivator. But as strong as she was, her power was built up through the accumulation of medicinal energy, an extremely unstable foundation. As such, their teacher had instructed her to start cultivating from the very bottom to reinforce her cultivation. Working diligently for the past 2 months, she had barely managed to reinforce her cultivation up to chrysalis realm, so how could she have any time to learn battle techniques? Besides, their teacher had been extremely busy in the past 2 months, only meeting them on 3 occasions to guide them in their cultivation. She wasn't taught any battle techniques? Hearing those words, Liao Song nearly spurted a mouthful of blood. Given her state, you still allowed her to challenge the Dragon Gate formation? Aren't you making light of the Dragon Gate formation? Putting aside the fact that she is unable to use any weapon and hasn't learned any battle techniques at all, more importantly, she only started cultivating 2 months ago. To allow such an amateur to challenge the Dragon Gate formation, aren't you underestimating our combat masters way too much? They were impressed by Principal Zhang because of his deep understanding of battle techniques and combat techniques. Those who had listened to his lecture had found their fighting prowess raised by leaps and bounds. However, even though Wei Ruyan was Principal Zhang's direct disciple, she had barely learned any of the basics. To challenge the Dragon Gate formation like that, there was no doubt, she was bound to lose. The same thoughts also surfaced in the minds of Wu Tianqiong, Wu Ran, and the others, and they couldn't help but shake their heads. It's fine. Since she wants to challenge the Dragon Gate formation, so be it. Besides, it is not certain whether she will lose or not. Contrary to the opinion of most, Wang Ying had a different thought in mind. The others might not have been aware of how fearsome Wei Ruyan was, but she was. Even if she were to fight against Wei Ruyan, she had no confidence that she would be able to achieve victory. The combat masters on the stage were indeed powerful, but it was not entirely impossible for Wei Ruyan to defeat them. Her teacher had taught each of them according to their own strengths. Since her teacher hadn't taught Wei Ruyan any battle techniques to date, naturally, that could only mean that there was no need to do so. Otherwise, given how the other students could easily become combat experts after an hour-long lecture, how could Wei Ruyan still be completely ignorant of battle techniques? Noticing the confidence in Wang Ying's voice, Liao Song shook his head. I think you are being too optimistic. The strength of our combat masters is no joke. Ah! What the heck? He had just been about to advise the other party against the matter when he suddenly caught sight of what was happening on the stage with his peripheral vision and choked on his words. What is going on? Why are your combat masters suddenly moving so slow as if they are drunk? Not only was Liao Song astonished by what he saw, Wu Tianqiong and the others also widened their eyes in shock. At this moment, the three combat masters of the dragon's tail were swaying weakly on their feet, and their movements were becoming slower and duller by the moment. It was as if they had turned from energetic young men into frail elderly all of a sudden. Isn't this cheating? Even if they wished to go easy on her, this is not the way to do so. Even I could clear the Dragon Gate formation like that. The crowd below were also bewildered by the situation on top. When they were facing Zheng Yang earlier, those combat masters had displayed an indomitable aura that would instill fear into any opponent. Why had they suddenly become so soft all of the sudden, as if there was no strength within their bodies? Was it because their opponent was a beautiful lady? But this was a formal trial, they shouldn't have been going easy on the other party like that, especially not so openly. How brazen! After taking a closer look, Liao Song suddenly noticed something, and his eyes narrowed in astonishment. They are not doing this on purpose. It looks more like they have been poisoned. He knew full well that his men wouldn't ever go easy on an opponent just because she was a beautiful lady. There was only one possibility in this scenario, and that was that they had been poisoned. But he had been watching the situation closely all along. From the start to the end, Wei Ruyan had been suppressed by their might, and there should have been no opportunity for her to poison them at all. Furthermore, the rules of the Dragon Gate formation forbade the usage of poison in the trial. The headquarters had been supervising the duel from above, and if Wei Ruyan had indeed resorted to such underhanded tricks, they would have terminated the trial immediately. The fact that this hadn't happened only meant that Wei Ruyan's act of poisoning her opponent was considered a part of her strength, and the duel was completely fair and honest. But how could this possibly be true? Liao Song felt so frenzied by the absurd situation before him that he nearly tore his hair out. We reminded Junior Ruyan to curb it, but it seems like it is futile, Lu Yang remarked with a bitter smile. They were all aware that Wei Ruyan possessed the innate poison body and poison soul constitution, and this was also why they weren't worried about sending Wei Ruyan up. Nevertheless, poison was still something typically shunned and feared on the master-teacher continent, so they had advised Wei Ruyan to keep her poison in check wherever possible. However, from the looks of it, they might have been underestimating the potency of Wei Ruyan's unique constitution. Innate poison body and poison soul constitution. It could be said that Wei Ruyan's very existence was a lethal poison, be it her body or her jinqi. Wei Ruyan had been trying to curb her poison consciously, but nevertheless, it was still able to easily render the combat masters, who possessed superior physical resilience, powerless. Those three are going to lose. Wang Ying nodded grimly, and before she could finish her words, Put on. Put on. Put on, the three combat masters collapsed to the ground with white foam trickling from their mouths. First section, cleared. With the three of them incapacitated, Wei Ruyan proceeded forward to the next section, the dragon's back, without any hesitation. Demoness, what kind of sorcery did you pull? The three combat masters of the dragon's back glared at Wei Ruyan warily as if they were facing a powerful enemy, not daring to look down on her in the least. Sorcery. I did nothing of the sort. Shaking her head, Wei Ruyan said, let's begin. After saying those words, she immediately charged forward and shrouded the three combat masters with her jinqi. Her attack was extremely crude, devoid of any technique at all, but the sheer potency of the poison contained in her jinqi could easily fell any opponent that came into contact with it. Not even deities were an exception to the rule. This was also the reason the innate poison body was such a feared existence in the world. Put on. Put on. Put on. Not too long later, the three combat masters of the dragon's back fell to the ground with white foam flowing down their chins. In less than 5 minutes, a delicate young lady, who had only cultivated for 2 months and had no knowledge of wielding a weapon or any battle techniques, had already cleared 2 sections. After defeating the 3 combat masters, Wei Ruyan moved on to the dragon's head. 5 minutes later, the 3 combat masters of the dragon's head were lying on the floor as well. They were indeed significantly stronger than Wei Ruyan, but in the face of the potent poison released by her, it didn't take long before they collapsed to the ground, powerless. She really cleared the trial. Having watched the entire scene, Liao Song was on the verge of tears. At this point, a certain thought surfaced in his mind, and he couldn't help but tremble. Could it be that the strength of their combat masters was really a joke? Chapter 969, returning to the surface, he had just said that their combat masters were powerful, and the next moment, they had been utterly defeated by two youths. It was one thing for the young man, considering that he was strong, but the young lady had only started cultivating 2 months ago, completely ignorant of battle techniques. The moment they stepped into the academy, they had been subdued by ordinary students of the Hongyuan Master Teacher Academy. After which, the incredibly difficult Dragon Gate formation, which only a handful of their countless combat masters had cleared in the past 300 years, ended up being overcome by two challengers consecutively. Honestly speaking, he was starting to doubt life itself. Principal Zhang, even if you are really formidable and powerful, surely you need not tear us apart so callously. It is one thing for you to be so powerful, but even students that you have casually taught are so formidable as well. What does that make us combat masters? Just as Liao Song was still feeling frustrated over the matter, Wang Ying suddenly spoke. Combat Master Liao, it seems like your men are unable to carry on with the next trial. What about the both of us? It was then that Liao Song suddenly recalled that the 9 combat masters on the stage were still unconscious from poison. In the past trials, it had always been their combat masters knocking others unconscious. Yet, the other party had only sent 2 students up, and their men were already either knocked unconscious or severely injured. Liao Song couldn't help but feel his heart turn cold. He pondered for a moment before replying. Our men need to rest for time being. We will resume the trial in 3 days. Just in case, we will bring in some more combat masters from the Combat Master Hall as well. There was nothing else he could do. His 9 subordinates were clearly under the effects of a very potent poison. Even if he were to treat them right now, they would still need several days to fully recover to their peak. If their strength was already compromised before the start of the battle, the results of the trial would be inaccurate, and the headquarters might not be willing to recognize it. Since that was the case, it would be best to first rest for several days and request for more men to be dispatched to serve as backup. It couldn't be that the Great Combat Master Hall couldn't even deal with a couple of students. All right. After a moment of hesitation, Wang Ying nodded. Zheng Yang had succeeded due to the preparation he had made beforehand, and Wei Ruyan had her unique constitution to fall back on. On the other hand, Shi and Lu Yang had neither of the two. If they were to depend solely on their strength, it would be too difficult for them to clear the trial. If they had 3 additional days, perhaps their teacher might have returned by then. They would be able to seek guidance from him, and their chances at clearing the trial would be significantly higher. It was not that their fighting prowess was beneath Zheng Yang's, but many of their moves and maneuvers had been exposed to the combat masters in the earlier fight, and the combat masters were bound to be guarded against them in future fights. Without the element of surprise, it would be hard for them to succeed. On the other hand, seeing that Wang Ying had agreed to it, Liao Song heaved a sigh of relief. If the other party were to insist on challenging the trial that instant but they were unable to come up with the required numbers for it, that would be truly humiliating for the Combat Master Hall. That was truly exciting. After watching such an incredible battle, I can pass away without any regrets. As expected of Principal Zhang's direct disciple, that Zheng Yang is indeed powerful. Of course. Just think about how formidable Principal Zhang is. How can his student be ordinary? Only 2 trials had been held, and many people were unable to comprehend the happenings in Wei Ruyan's trial, but nevertheless, Zheng Yang's battle had still been incredibly exciting. The many cultivators who had traveled from far and wide to spectate the battle couldn't help but feel that their trip hadn't been wasted. They had managed to witness the birth of a new legend with their own eyes. I wonder what the conditions are to becoming Principal Zhang's direct disciple. If it is possible, I would love to become his direct disciple, too. There were also quite a few among the crowd who began to contemplate about how they could become Principal Zhang's direct disciple and ascend to the top in a single step. Even the candidates of the other 3 academies who had failed to clear the combat master selection couldn't help but harbor such thoughts as they gazed at Zheng Yang with an excited gleam in their eyes. At this very moment, however, the man whom they wanted to acknowledge as their teacher was currently still within the depths of the subterranean gallery, seated within the seal with his eyes closed. After some time, he finally opened his eyes. Just a little more. Exhaling deeply, Zhang Xian got to his feet. The previous few days spent recultivating the Saint Ascension decipher, which had been modified according to the structure of the seal, while repairing the seal had enhanced his strength by leaps and bounds. While his cultivation was still at nascent Saint Pinnacle, the same as before, the fighting prowess he could exert was far greater than before. At the same time, his origin core had also become even stabler and sturdier, revolving slowly within his dantian in the form of a golden sphere. At this point, he was already at the final step of his cultivation, lacking just the final decipher. According to Zhang Xian's deduction, he would need to take in vast amounts of spiritual energy as soon as this step was completed, and that could destabilize the seal if he were to do it within. Thus, he decisively halted his cultivation. Who? Zhang Xian leaped out from the interior of the seal. The seal didn't pose much of an impediment to humans, but to the otherworldly demonic tribe, it was no different from a barrier severing space, making it nigh impossible for them to cross through it. Returning to the subterranean gallery, Zhang Xian quickly found himself a safe location. Taking out his formation flags, he set up a grade 6 spirit gathering formation with a snap of his fingers. After which, he took a seat at the center, tossed a few hundred high-tier spirit stones around him, and began to cultivate. With the spoils of war from slaying the 200 otherworldly demons and the profits he had obtained from the Shen clan, he had no lack of high-tier spirit stones at the moment. Besides, as long as he could raise his strength, there was no price too heavy to pay. Taking a deep breath, Zhang Xian opened his acupoints, and the surrounding spiritual energy immediately gushed into his body with furious momentum, creating a whirlpool of spiritual energy around him. The vast amount of spiritual energy was swiftly converted into Zhenqi before being gathered together to be crafted into a decipher through a unique method, filling up the last remaining gap of the golden sphere. Hong Long. After some time, with a resounding blast, the spiritual energy in the spirit gathering formation was abruptly dried out in an instant, and the hundreds of high-tier spirit stones were reduced to dust. Following which, Zhang Xian felt his dantian jolt violently. The golden sphere underwent a metamorphosis as a deep shade of violet crept onto it. This violet origin core carried a weight reminiscent of an entire planet, granting one immense strength as it revolved slowly on the spot. What a powerful origin core! Zhang Xian's eyes lit up as he clenched his fists tightly in excitement. He could clearly feel his perception of the surrounding spiritual energy becoming even clearer and more vivid, allowing him to tap into it and refine it into Zhenqi far more efficiently. In other words, with this violet origin core, he could cultivate Zhenqi far quicker and purer than before. Could this be a first-grade origin core? Zhang Xian's eyes trembled in agitation. He had already achieved a second-grade pinnacle origin core before. While there was nothing detailed in the Saint Ascension decipher about an origin core metamorphosing into a violet sphere, chances were that it was a first-grade origin core. In the entire history of the Master-Teacher continent, Kong Shi was the only one known to have successfully formed a first-grade origin core. It wielded strength far beyond the others, and it was the key to becoming a celestial saint. It is a pity that I am still lacking the catalyst artifact, or else I would be able to attempt a breakthrough to Saint Realm on the spot. The more Zhang Xian studied the violet origin core in his body and learned about it, the more impressed he felt. Currently, his comprehension of the Saint Ascension decipher still had a few flaws. He needed scarlet firefly fruits for a breakthrough to half-saint, a lightning resonance stone for a breakthrough to nascent saint, and the 7-colored earth jade essence for a breakthrough to Saint Realm. This artifact was only found in the depths of an earth vein, and it was even rarer than the earth vein spirit essence. Even despite the many treasures and huge fortune that he had accumulated, he had never seen the seven-colored earth jade essence before. Without this catalyst artifact, he wouldn't be able to reach Saint Realm. Seems like I can only search for it patiently. While Zhang Xian did not have it, it didn't mean that Hongyuan Empire didn't have it. After leaving the subterranean gallery, he could take his time looking for it. If worst came to worst, he could always apply for it from the Master Teacher Pavilion headquarters. Having guarded mankind for several dozen millenniums, what artifacts would the Master Teacher Pavilion headquarters possibly not have in their treasure vault? As long as one had an ample amount of contribution and wealth, one could exchange for anything existing on the Master Teacher continent with the Master Teacher Pavilion headquarters. I am done repairing the seal, and the invading otherworldly demons have been killed as well. It is about time for me to return. Getting to his feet, Zhang Xian stretched his back lazily before storing the formation flags. After which, he took one more glance at the seal and heaved a sigh of relief. Over the past few days of hard work, he had mended the weakened areas of the formation perfectly. With that, it would be difficult for the otherworldly demons to breach it again, regardless of whatever means they had on their hands. It had been several days since he had gone down to the subterranean gallery, so it was about time for him to return. The conditions in the subterranean gallery was indeed harsh. Just the concentrated killing intent in itself would make it difficult for any ordinary cultivator to catch their breath. Nevertheless, Zhang Xian had still managed to make considerable gains in here. He had managed to advance his cultivation to nascent Saint Pinnacle and upgrade his origin core to first grade, and these two gains were sufficient to make this trip worthwhile. Furthermore, his Saint 1 Dan puppets had been upgraded to Saint 3 Dan, and this represented more cards he could use to help himself out of dire situations. Flying back, Zhang Xian didn't see Lu Feng and the others. He assumed that they had returned in advance after noticing that the threat from the otherworldly demons had been resolved, so he decided to head straight back. Soon, he reached the area that he had arrived at the subterranean gallery from and used his spirit to communicate with the wills contained within the mausoleum tablet. Who? A powerful suction force drew him in, and in the next moment, he was already standing back in the area within the mausoleum tablet. Mu Shirzhua was waiting for him. He swiftly informed the other party about the situation in the subterranean gallery, and this left the other party astonished. This seal was set up by one of Kong Shi's followers back then, and it has the laws of space tied into it. It is impossible to damage it without the strength of one who has reached the pinnacle of Saint Realm. The other side of the seal links to an otherworldly battlefield known as the Qingtian battlefield. It is said that the strongest otherworldly demon within possesses the strength of Saint 5 Dan. Even Qingtian conferred empire would struggle to face an expert of that caliber. Fortunately, it is impossible for the otherworldly demons on the other side to breach the seal. This is also the reason the headquarters didn't station any personnel here. For them to be able to dispatch soldiers over to our side through certain means, that is truly unnerving. There is no need to worry. I have already repaired the damaged seal. Zhang Xian began to speak about what he had encountered over the past few days. Of course, the unique method he had used to repair the seal was conveniently attributed to Yang Xian. Otherwise, considering his current cultivation, there was no one who would possibly believe that he had been able to repair the seal. A person who is qualified to take a celestial master teacher as his student can't possibly be someone simple. It is truly a pity that I am unable to meet your teacher and seek his guidance. Mu Shi lamented. After chatting for a while longer, Zhang Xian managed to reassure the wills of the preceding principal that the problem had been resolved. After which, he left the mausoleum tablet before making his way out of the mausoleum of principals. As soon as he was out, he saw school head Zhao and school head Mo waiting for him outside with worry on their faces. Seeing their expression, Zhang Xian frowned. What is wrong? Principal Zhang. Why did it take you so long to return? School head Zhao asked. After entering, I suddenly had a moment of inspiration, so I remained inside to make a breakthrough, Zhang Xian replied with the excuse he had already come up with in advance. In order to avoid unneeded fear and panic, it was best for as few people as possible to learn about the matter regarding the subterranean gallery and the otherworldly demons. Breakthrough? School head Zhao and school head Mo traded a glance as their mouth twitched with uncanny harmony. Is the mausoleum of principles still well? How great is the destruction? Does it need fixing? Sigh, what is done is done. Principal Zhang, you don't need to blame yourself for it. It seemed that nothing good had ever happened whenever their principal cultivated. Take the blacksmith school for example, the chamber of earth flame and passageway of records had ended up collapsing due to him cultivating his physical body. Destruction. Blame myself? It was only at this moment that Zhang Xian finally comprehended what the two school heads were worried about, and he couldn't help but fall speechless. For someone as reliable and dependable as him to be misunderstood like that. That was utter nonsense. Are the both of you fine? Are you really my subordinates? Chapter 970, Mu Shi returns after explaining for a very long time and emphasizing time and time again that the mausoleum of principles was completely unharmed. The duo was still looking at him with a look of doubt. Eventually, Zhang Xian could only shake his head in frustration and give up on the matter. It would suffice for him to know that he hadn't done anything wrong. For someone as upright and flawless as him, the world would eventually return him justice. Principal Zhang, in the 5 days you have been gone for, the personnel from the Combat Master Hall arrived, and Zhen Yang and Wei Ruyan cleared their trial. Putting aside the matter regarding the Mausoleum of Principles, school head Mo quickly filled Zhang Xian in on the matters that had happened over the past few days. At the end of which, Zhang Xian gestured with a slight nod. As his direct disciple, it was within his expectations that Zhen Yang would be able to clear the trial. However, he hadn't really expected Wei Ruyan to be able to clear it as well. From the looks of it, it seemed like there was really nothing impressive about the combat masters. After asking about several problems concerning the academy and proposing various measures to deal with them, Zhang Xian finally returned to his residence under the lead of the two school heads. As the principal, it would be a breach of etiquette if he didn't pay the guests from the Combat Master Hall and the 3 Master Teacher Academies a visit at least once in the duration of their stay. Thus, he had the servants to prepare a bath for him so that he could wash and tidy himself up to greet the combat masters. However, before he could do so, his butler, Sun Chang, abruptly rushed into the residence with hurried footsteps. Young master. Sun Chang quickly ran up to Zhang Xian upon seeing him. What's wrong? Zhang Xian asked. Having followed him for some time, Sun Chang was well aware that he hated trouble. As such, Sun Chang would usually deal with most matters himself, not troubling him except for matters that were particularly important. Thus, for Sun Chang to suddenly rush over with such an anxious look on his face, it could only mean that something severe had happened. Young Mistress Ruyan, she, has fainted again. Sun Chang quickly reported. Ruyan fainted? Zhang Xian was taken aback. That shouldn't be. After being nurtured by the Bodhi Saint tree, Wei Ruyan's soul should have been no different from that of an ordinary person, significantly stronger and more resilient even. Her body had also been nourished by the grade 7 Grand Intermittence pill, restoring it back to full health. On top of that, she had also cultivated a simplified version of the Heaven's Path divine art. For one who had the strength to defeat even the combat masters easily, why would she faint so abruptly? I am not too sure about the reason behind it either. That day, when we returned to our manor after defeating the combat masters, she said that she felt unwell, and shortly after, she fell ill, Sun Chang replied. Lead me there. Knowing that it would be impossible for him to determine the cause of Wei Ruyan's illness just by listening to Sun Chang's words, Zhang Xian clasped his fist to bid school head Mo and the others farewell before heading hurriedly back to his manor. Entering Wei Ruyan's room, Zhang Xian saw that she was lying on the bed with a tight frown on her forehead, unconscious. Wang Ying was seated by the side of her bed, taking care of her diligently. There were various plants in the courtyard outside the room, but at this moment, they were all dry and withered, as if heralding the arrival of winter. What is going on? Zhang Xian frowned. Teacher, you are finally back. Upon seeing Zhang Xian, Wang Ying hurriedly stood up. Raising his hand to gesture that it wasn't the time for questions, Zhang Xian hurriedly walked up to Wei Ruyan and placed his fingers on her pulse. A moment later, Zhang Xian's face turned grim, and he lifted his gaze and asked, I need a detailed recount about the fight Ruyan had with the combat masters that day. Yes. That day, Junior Ruyan went onto the stage to battle, and through exerting her jinqi, she poisoned all 9 of the combat masters in the trial. Wang Ying went through everything that happened that day without hiding anything. While school head Mo and the others knew that Wei Ruyan had defeated the combat masters through using poison, they weren't aware of her innate poison body. As such, their explanation had lacked crucial details. On the other hand, Wang Ying was able to explain everything that had happened clearly, reconstructing the scene from back then perfectly. After finishing the recount, Wang Ying looked at Zhang Xian anxiously and asked, Teacher, how is she? With a deep frown, Zhang Xian replied, It isn't anything severe. It seems like the might she exerted through the innate poison body then exceeded her current limits, resulting in her loss of consciousness. Wei Ruyan possessed not only the innate poison body but also the poison soul constitution. It was so rare that one wouldn't find another like her throughout the entire master-teacher continent in the next several dozen millenniums. As long as she cultivated, the lethal poison contained within her jinqi would be her strongest weapon against any foe. Under normal circumstances, once she awakened her unique constitution, her cultivation and fighting prowess would rise swiftly, easily surpassing all of her peers. However, there was a flaw to it. Every time she utilized the poison aura within her body, it would grow a little. The more she used it, the more poison aura she would accumulate. If she couldn't find a good method to deal with it, it could lead to a dangerous amount of poison aura accumulating in her body, causing her to lose control of her power. If so, she could very well suffer a backlash and lose consciousness. This was the current situation she was in. Despite her lacking strength, she had forcefully challenged the Dragon Gate formation and exerted a strength beyond her physical limits. As a result, she had lost control over the poison aura within her body, causing a backlash from her innate poison body. Having only woken up 2 months ago, the only cultivation technique she had cultivated was a simplified version of the Heaven's Path divine art. She had zero knowledge about the cultivation techniques of poison masters, so she had no way of clearing away the overwhelming quantity of poison aura accumulated in her. Naturally, this led to her discomfort and eventual loss of consciousness. It is fortunate that she has very strong self-control. Otherwise, the entire Hongyuan city might be harmed due to the sheer prowess of her innate poison body. Zhang Xian shook his head. Just the fact that the powerful combat masters were unable to withstand her poison jinqi went to show how potent her poison was. Had it not been for her determined will, suppressing the poison aura firmly even after losing consciousness, the poison aura could potentially have spread through the entire city via the wind and harmed countless innocent lives. It was also due to the difficulty in controlling the innate poison body that the world had named it the Constitution of Disaster, leaving many fearful to approach. For one, despite trying her best to suppress her poison aura, the plants in the courtyard still withered during the corrosion of the poison due to their proximity to her, resulting in the sight Zhang Xian saw before entering the room. It was fortunate that Wei Ruyan had cultivated the simplified version of the Heaven's Path divine art, allowing her to conceal the unique properties of her innate poison body perfectly. Otherwise, it could possibly have brought countless agents of righteousness to their doorstep, and that would have been troublesome to deal with. Teacher, what do we do now? Hearing the explanation, Wang Ying's face paled. After witnessing the sheer prowess of Wei Ruyan's unique constitution, she had envied the other party for a very long time. However, upon seeing this, she realized that, rather than a blessing, it was a curse. Zhang Xian pondered for a moment before replying. I will try to neutralize of the poison aura within her body to alleviate the pressure on her body for the time being. However, To resolve the problem for good, I think that we might have to make a journey to the poison hall. Despite Zhang Xian's exceptional mastery in the way of medicine, it was still beyond his means to deduce a feasible method for Wei Ruyan to resolve the problem regarding her poison aura once and for all. The only people who could do so were probably the experts in the field of poison, the poison hall. They had the most perfect heritage in the field of poison, as well as records regarding the innate poison body. Perhaps, they might have a way for one to utilize the prowess of the innate poison body without accumulating poison aura as well. Poison hall. Wang Ying was taken aback for a moment before eventually nodding in realization. This seemed to be the only solution they had. Zhang Xian placed his hand on Wei Ruyan's pulse and slowly infused his heaven's path Shenqi in the latter's body. Time passed, but the frown on Zhang Xian's forehead only seemed to deepen further. He had thought that he could easily resolve the problem regarding the accumulation of poison aura through neutralizing it with his heaven's path Shenqi, but his thoughts had been too naive. The poison aura accumulated in Wei Ruyan's body was fused together with her innate poison body and poison soul constitution. If he were to attempt to neutralize the poison aura forcefully, it might potentially cause significant harm to Wei Ruyan's body and soul, or in the worst-case scenario, result in her demise. Another possible solution Zhang Xian had thought of was to draw her poison aura out with his heaven's path Shenqi. The chances of a fatality were lower in that case, but it would deal significant damage to her body as well. In other words, regardless of whether he chose to neutralize the poison aura or draw it out, it wouldn't be good for the unconscious Wei Ruyan. It seems like I can only hurry to the poison hall. Zhang Xian tried to deduce other plausible solutions, but none of them were feasible. Frustrated, he rubbed his glabella forcefully. Despite the many means as he had, his understanding of poison was still only at 2-star. On top of that, this was the first time he had encountered the innate poison body. If there was no viable treatment method at the moment, he would have to head to the poison hall to collect books and accrue more knowledge to work with. It just so happens that I was intending to make a trip to the poison hall myself soon. I should bring the matter forward then. Previously, in the Mausoleum of Principles, the old principal had left a message advising Zhang Xian to pay a visit to the Hongyuan Empire Poison Hall, so he had been intending to pay it a visit when he had time to root out the underlying dangers threatening the academy. However, given that Wei Ruyan was in a perilous condition, he would have to bring this plan ahead. Sun Cheng, here is 1,000 high-tier spirit stones. I need you to obtain as much information about the poison hall in Hongyuan Empire as you can, as fast as possible. Flicking his wrist, Zhang Xian took out a pile of high-tier spirit stones and passed them over. Even though the old principal had said that the poison hall was likely in the vicinity of Jingyuan City, it would still be safer to verify the information first. Otherwise, he might end up making a wasted trip. Young master, there is no need to spend spirit stones on this matter. I can just ask the Shin clan about this. They manage quite a large medicinal herb business, so it is very likely that they may have some news regarding the poison hall in Hongyuan Empire, Sun Cheng replied. As one of the 4 great clans of Hongyuan City, the Shin clan had business dealings all over the empire. One of their largest businesses was the sales of medicinal herbs. If the poison hall wished to concoct poison, they would surely need some connections with medicinal herb dealers to procure the medicinal herbs they required. Perhaps, the Shin clan might just have a relationship of some kind with the poison hall in Hongyuan Empire. Had it been anyone else, and this included the old principal as well, it was unlikely that they would have been able to get information regarding the poison hall out of the Shin clan. After all, the Shin clan had a business to manage, and leaking information about the poison hall to others, especially master teachers, could very well sour their relationship with the poison hall. However, Zhang Xian was different. For one, the Shin clan had already profited greatly from their dealings with him, and the potential he had shown thus far would make it worthwhile for them to risk getting on the wrong side of the poison hall for him. Thus, they were unlikely to hide the information regarding the poison hall from him. All right, go and ask them about the matter. Zhang Xian nodded. In the field of maintaining interpersonal relationships and business dealings, he was not a match for Sun Chang. Thus, it was better to leave this matter to the other party. Yes. Sun Chang nodded before backing out of the room. After he left, Zhang Xian was just about to ask Wang Ying about the details regarding Wei Ruyan's condition over the past 2 days when the ground abruptly trembled. The resounding chime of a bell boomed across every nook and cranny of Hongyuan City, seemingly summoning someone. The assembly bell? Standing up, Zhang Xian frowned. The assembly bell was a bell that was used to gather master teachers together in times of emergency. Once it was tolled, all master teachers who heard it had to rush over regardless of where they were or what they were doing. Listening closely, Zhang Xian noted that the sound originated from the Master Teacher Academy, and he couldn't help but be slightly bewildered. It had only been an hour since he had left the Master Teacher Academy, and the assembly bell had suddenly been rung. What could have happened within this short span of time? Perplexed, Zhang Xian flicked his wrist, and a communication token appeared in his hands. School head Mo had sent him a message. Qingyuan conferred empire, 7-star high-tier master teacher Wu Rufeng and master teacher Mu Hong have arrived at the academy. Please return quickly. Mu Shi has returned. Zhang Xian fell into a moment of thought. Back then, when he discovered that Yu Su had betrayed humanity, he entrusted the latter to Mu Hong to investigate the matter. For Mu Hong to have returned at this moment, it was likely that this meant that the other party had uncovered something regarding the matter. I will head over right now. Zhang Xian replied through the communication token. After which, he took out a few grade 6 pills and fed them to Wei Ruyan. These pills served to suppress the poison aura within her body so that it wouldn't harm those around her indiscriminately. Following that, he issued some instruction to Wang Ying before finally heading out. It didn't take long for him to return to the academy. At this point, all of the students, teachers, elders, and even the master teachers of the Hongyuan Empire Master Teacher Pavilion had gathered on the academy's training ground, looking at one another with puzzled expressions on their faces, unsure of what was going on. Chapter 971, Dealing with Yu Su, Principal Zhang. As soon as Zhang Xian arrived at the training grounds, school head Mo and the others immediately walked up to him. Responding with a nod, Zhang Xian turned his gaze to the stage and saw Mu Shi and an elder standing on top. The elder beside Mu Shi seemed to be in his 50s, and he possessed a powerful cultivation that felt as vast as the ocean, similar to the sensation he had felt from the Golden Leaf King and Green Leaf King back in the subterranean gallery, Saint 4 Dan. Saint 3 Dan Embryonic Soul Realm was also known as the Origin Soul Realm. At this point, one's origin core would metamorphose from a core into the form of an infant. Upon reaching this realm, one's comprehension of the world would deepen, and with each breath, one could take in the energy contained in the world and wield it for one's use. In Saint 4 Dan Primordial Spirit Realm, a cultivator's origin soul would evolve into a Primordial Spirit One. Any cultivator that had reached the Primordial Spirit Realm was extremely difficult to kill due to the unique nature of their existence. This was also the reason Zhang Xian had chosen to turn the two kings against one another, inciting them to kill one another. Otherwise, it would have been difficult for him to eliminate all of the otherworldly demons in the subterranean gallery so easily. Surprisingly, the master teacher beside Mu Shi had also reached such a level. Even in view of the entire Qingyuan conferred empire, he could be considered one of the strongest experts. Why would a person as powerful as him come down to Hongyuan Empire? Zhang Xian sent a telepathic message to school head Mo. This must be the person you told me about earlier, 7-star high-tier master teacher Wu Rufeng. Yes. School head Mo nodded. He is the vice head of the Qingyuan conferred empire master teacher pavilion. He is an austere person who abhors all evil. While school head Mo was in the midst of introducing the man on the stage to Zhang Xian, the person in question glanced coldly downward with his hands behind his back. School head Mo, is your principal here yet? To keep all of us waiting like this, he sure knows how to put on airs. Seeing that Wu Shi already had a bad impression of him, a bitter smile crept on Zhang Xian's lips. Stepping forward, he bowed politely and said, "I believe. I am the principal who knows how to put on airs that you are speaking of." After receiving the news, he had needed to spend some time feeding Wei Ruyan some pills to stabilize her condition, so he had ended up arriving late. Judging from the state of those in the area, it seemed like they had already been here for some time. "You are the principal here?" Wu Shi took a glance at Zhang Xian, and his eyebrows shot up. "Nascent Saint Pinnacle. It seems like the Hongyuan Master Teacher Academy has truly fallen." Coming from the headquarters, he had heard that the Hongyuan Master Teacher Academy had eventually inaugurated a 20-year-old young man to serve as their principal, so he was curious to see who the other party was. But he hadn't expected that after arriving in the academy for some time, the other party would still be nowhere in sight. Even after ringing the assembly bell, the other party had only arrived around 30 minutes later. More importantly, his clothes were still completely cloaked with dust. This was blatant disrespect toward him. On top of that, the other party was only at nascent Saint Realm Pinnacle, not even reaching Saint Realm yet. A person with such weak cultivation had actually been inaugurated as the principal of a Master Teacher Academy? Wasn't this taking this matter way too lightly? Mu Shi had left prior to the inauguration ceremony, so he was unaware that Zhang Xian had tamed the spirit beasts and saint beasts of the Cloud Mist Ridge. Furthermore, with other more important matters to attend to, Mu Shi had neglected to inform Wu Shi about the various outstanding accomplishments that Zhang Xian had accomplished, which could easily dim the radiance of the preceding principles. Wu Shi. Upon hearing those words, Mu Shi quickly whispered to Wu Shi in a hushed voice, "Zhang Shi is a very talented individual, and he has the guidance of a very powerful teacher." Humph. But before Mu Shi could finish his words, Wu Shi had already interrupted him with a darkened face. Regardless of how powerful his teacher may be, he must be strong himself as well. Enough, let's not waste our time on this matter any further. Principal Zhang, you are to write a reflective letter regarding your lack of respect and your mistakes, or else I will have you punished for your breach of responsibility. Reflective letter? Zhang Xian was dumbfounded. Those two words felt so far away. To think that a day would come when a principal would have to write a reflective letter. But this fellow. To be going after him when he had barely arrived in the area, it was obvious that the other party was trying to establish his authority through him. It was one thing if Zhang Xian had offended the other party in the past, but he hadn't even met the other party before. Why was the other party trying to pick faults with him? Zhang Xian scratched his head and sighed deeply. If the other party was truly determined to find faults with him, perhaps he really should consider bringing out his puppets to teach the other party some respect first. Wu Shi. While Zhang Xian was still contemplating the issue, Mu Shi hurriedly said, "Principal Zhang was only inaugurated 3 months ago, and more importantly, he is the one who captured." Interrupting Mu Shi's explanation, Wu Shi waved his hands impatiently. Enough. For a traitor to emerge from the Hongyuan Master Teacher Academy, he, as the principal, has a huge responsibility to bear. Hurry up and make the announcement, we still have more important matters to attend to afterwards. Yes. Mu Shi could only nod in response to that. Sighing deeply, he surveyed the crowd for a moment before speaking. "Everyone, the reason we have gathered you here is to make an important announcement." An important announcement? The master teachers beneath the stage glanced at one another in bewilderment. For 2 7-star master teachers to specially make the trip down to Hongyuan Empire and assemble them all, the announcement that they had to make was bound to be significant. Eliminating the otherworldly demonic tribe has always been one of the core responsibilities of our Master Teacher Pavilion, and most Master Teachers view it as their mission as well. However, just as there are those who embrace this mission, there are also those who attempt to undermine it for the sake of their own petty gains. At this point, Mu Shi's face turned grim and austere. If it was an ordinary cultivator who had betrayed mankind, as well as their kin and friends, in face of possible death, it would be abhorrent but understandable. After all, the fear of death is not something that just anyone can overcome. However, As master teachers respected by countless others, if we can't even hold on to our faith in dire situations, that is unforgivable. To put it lightly, that is equivalent to losing our pride and dignity. To put it harshly, that is the betrayal of humanity. Mu Shi's voice echoed resoundingly across the training grounds. Betrayal of humanity? That's indeed true. The respect that we, master teachers, are accorded comes with a responsibility. We bear the mission of leading mankind through crises and toward prosperity. If we can't persist in our faith in times of trouble, who else will? The many master teachers beneath the stage nodded in agreement. While enjoying the elevated standing and privileges that mankind had bestowed upon them, master teachers had to shoulder a responsibility equivalent to that. Mankind had to pay a heavy price to groom every single high-ranked master teacher. As such, the betrayal of a master teacher in times of crises was intolerable. Silence. Today, I am going to talk about a certain master teacher who has betrayed mankind. Seeing that he had managed to draw everyone's mood along with him, Mu Shi waved his hands grandly and continued. For his own safety, this man has disregarded the values that we, master teachers, embrace and plunged more than 26-star pinnacle master teachers into a dangerous position. To date, we don't even know whether they are still alive or not. These 26-star master teachers were his comrades and friends, but he abandoned them without the slightest bit of remorse. After the incident, he even dared to shamelessly return to the Master Teacher Academy and preach values to others, enjoying the resources and respect of others. How do you think we should deal with such a person? There is such a person among us. Kill him. His betrayal is an intolerable crime. There are no grounds for negotiation at all. To plunge more than 26-star master teachers into a dangerous position, his crime is so great that even killing him several times over won't cleanse him of his sins. Mu Shi, who is the person you are speaking of? Is he a teacher of our Master Teacher Academy? Upon hearing the question, a huge uproar broke out beneath the stage. For the two 7-star master teachers to talk about betrayal and preaching morals, it was clear that the person whom they were going to judge was related to the Hongyuan Master Teacher Academy. Instead of answering the crowd's question, Mu Shi flung his sleeves and said with his head held high, "Bring him in." Shortly after those words were uttered, the cry of a saint beast sounded from the sky, and a saint realm tiger eagle beast swooped down. With a shake of its body, a human fell heavily onto the ground. That is Vice School Head Yusu. It is indeed Vice School Head Yusu. Could he be the traitor of humanity? Wasn't he taken away by Principal Zhang after losing to the latter in a life-and-death physician duel? Why is he here? In the past 2 years, he has remained cooped up within the Master Teacher Academy, devoting his time to nurturing medicinal herbs in his residence. How could he possibly have the opportunity to collude with the otherworldly demonic tribe? I have even attended his lessons before. Back then, when Principal Zhang challenged him to a life-and-death physician duel, I even felt great animosity toward Principal Zhang for a period of time. Upon getting a clear glimpse of the person who had appeared on the stage, a huge uproar broke out amid the crowd. Everyone widened their eyes in disbelief. 3 months ago, when Principal Zhang challenged Yusu, there had been quite a few who were sympathetic to Yusu's plight, thinking that it was disrespectful for Principal Zhang to have challenged an esteemed elder regardless of how capable he was. Who could have thought that he would actually be a traitor of humanity? For the Qingyuan conferred Empire Master Teacher Pavilion to dispatch 2 7-star master teachers over to announce this before them, they had to have concrete evidence on hand. There was no doubt about it anymore. I believe all of you should know this man very well even if I don't say much about it. Mu Shi glanced at the feeble Yusu collapsed on the ground and harumphed coldly. Do you want to explain it to them yourself, or shall I have the Teacher Guild's guild letter do the job? The Master Teacher Pavilion could be considered a subsidiary of the Teacher Guild. A guild letter from it was comparable to the imperial edict of an emperor. Any declaration made through the guild letter would be automatically recorded into the records of the Teacher Guild and Master Teacher Pavilion, allowing all branches to browse through the information. To put it simply, if his crimes were to be indicted through the guild letter, it would be as good as being judged guilty before the world. There would be no possible redemption for him. Yu Su's lips quivered. If he were to admit it himself, only those who were present in the area would learn of the matter. But if a guild letter were to be issued, his misdeeds would be recorded in all of the Teacher Guild and Master Teacher Pavilion branches over the Master Teacher continent, and his name would be spat at for countless years to come. Without hesitating for too long, Yu Su nodded. I will explain it to them. Since he had already long admitted to his crimes, there was nothing for him to hide anymore. All right then, go on. Mu Shi waved his hand disdainfully. Yes. Gritting his teeth, Yu Su began his explanation. It is my fault. I was the one who placed our old principal into a dangerous position. Soon, he swiftly repeated everything that he had confessed to Zhang Xian back then. This time, his account was even more detailed. By the time he finished his story, the master teachers assembled in the area already had their fists clenched tightly together, and veins popped from their temples. Kill him. I truly didn't expect Yu Su to be such a person. He is truly a black sheep of the master teachers. It is laughable that I attended his lecture and thought of him as a respectable elder. This is going to become the greatest stain on my life. Principal Zhang must have noticed that there was something wrong with Yu Su, that was why he challenged the latter to a life-and-death physician duel so as to investigate his case and hand him over to Mu Shi. Now that you speak of it, that does seem to be very possible. If not for Principal Zhang, we might still have been kept in the dark by that scoundrel. All of the master teachers beneath the stage were enraged, and they roared furiously. Betraying mankind for the otherworldly demonic tribe, obeying their orders to harm his own comrades, causing the old principal to go missing and the entire Hongyuan Master Teacher Academy to descend into chaos. Just as Mu Shi had said, this was an unforgivable crime. Since you have already admitted to your crime, I won't say anything else about it. Now, I shall announce the verdict made by the Qingyuan Empire Master Teacher Pavilion. Facing the enraged crowd, Mu Shi took out a scroll and gently rolled it open. Voila! A brilliant flash of light burst in the air, and an emotionless voice reverberated in the air. Yu Su, for betraying mankind and harming his fellow master teachers, has infringed on the rules of the Master Teacher Pavilion and transgressed the bottom line of a master teacher. For his crimes, he shall be stripped of his identity as a master teacher and beheaded to serve as a warning to others. Beheaded? Upon hearing the verdict, Yu Su's face paled as he collapsed weakly to the ground. As if having lost his soul, the light in his eyes vanished. Chapter 972, Seniority. Seeing his state, Zhang Xian shook his head. Since he knew that such fate would befall him, he never should have done what he did back then. It was only natural for mortals to fear death, but to collude with the otherworldly demonic tribe was equivalent to giving up on the justice in one's heart. Justice and life, there was no saying which was more important. But since Yu Su had made his choice, he would have to bear the price of failure. It is a pity that Wei Ruyan is unconscious at the moment and is unable to witness this. Yu Su was the mastermind behind Wei Changfeng's death, and as Wei Changfeng's daughter, it was indeed regretful that Wei Ruyan was unable to witness the death of her enemy with her own eyes. This public execution served to indicate the Master Teacher Pavilion's attitude toward all traitors. As this was a decision made by the headquarters, Zhang Xian had no right to intervene. Besides, Yu Su had already lived for long enough, it was about time for him to accept his punishment. After dealing with Yu Su, Mu Shi turned to the others and said, the four principals, Combat Master Liao, Combat Master Zhua, and fellow elders, the two of us have come down here today to discuss something with you. Please follow me. Yes. Nodding in response, the crowd followed Mu Shi to the Elder Hall. In truth, he had been puzzled as to why the headquarters would dispatch 2 7-star master teachers to Hongyuan Empire, not to mention, one of them was even at Saint Realm 4 Dan. If it was just to deal with Yu Su, there was no such need. There was bound to be some other reason. Mu Shi had stayed in the Hongyuan Master Teacher Academy from a fairly long period of time before, so he was rather familiar with the area. It didn't take long for the crowd to arrive in the large assembly room. After everyone got seated, school head Mo activated the formation to isolate the room. After which, Mu Shi shot a sweeping gaze at the crowd before speaking. The reason I had all of you gather here today is due to a piece of information we have received while interrogating Yusu. After saying that, Mu Shi flicked his wrist, and a token appeared in his hand. The token was incredibly worn and damaged, and it seemed as if it would break apart at any moment. I believe all of you should recognize this. Mu Shi said. Is that a principal's seal? Zhang Xian asked with a frown. The token might have been worn and damaged, but he could still clearly feel the reinforcement of countless wills within. It was similar to the principal's seal in his possession, just that it looked a bit shabbier. Indeed. This is a principal's seal, the one belonging to the old principal of the Hongyuan Master Teacher Academy, Zhang Yinqiu. Mu Shi explained. The principal's seal of our old principal? Could it be? Upon hearing Mu Shi's words, school head Mo was stunned for a moment before his face flushed in agitation. He is still alive. School head Xiao and the others also swiftly turned their gazes at Mu Shi anxiously. While they had already recognized Zhang Xian as the new principal, they had spent some time with the old principal and viewed him as a close friend. Thus, when they heard the news, they couldn't curb their agitation. I can't say for certain whether he is dead or not, but someone forcefully sent this item out from the ancient domain, Mu Shi replied grimly. Forcefully sent this item out? What does that mean? Mu Shi, can you explain it in more detail? Zhang Xian asked. Mu Shi nodded as he recalled the matter. After bringing Yusu back to the headquarters that day, we interrogated him and found the location of the ancient domain that the old principal had gone missing in. Thus, we dispatched some men to take a look. However, when we arrived at the area where the ancient domain was located, we realized that it was located at an area with a complicated geographical terrain that seemed to obey some kind of rhythm. Based on our deduction, the ancient domain only opens at certain times, and once the moment passes, one can only wait for the next instance. While our men were calculating the ideal timing to enter the ancient domain, this token abruptly flew out of the ancient domain. Hearing those words, school head Mo's face flushed in agitation. Mu Shi, are you saying that the principal's seal flew out from the ancient domain that our old principal disappeared in? That's right. Mu Shi nodded. Then. School head Mo's breathing hastened. Doesn't that mean that the principal's seal was sent out by the old principal? It had been only around 3 months since Yusu was captured, and the principal's seal had been found. This meant that there was a good chance that the old principal was still alive at this point. Perhaps, he might have been trapped in a certain location of the ancient domain, unable to escape. That would explain why he had forcefully sent his principal's seal out, hoping that aid would be sent for him. I am not sure about the situation within the ancient domain. It could also be that the old principal might have released the principal's seal 2 years ago, and it only appeared once more after sensing the aura of a master teacher in the vicinity. Mu Shi wasn't as optimistic about the situation as school head Mo. Everyone fell silent. Mu Shi's words made sense as well. The principal's seal was created by the gathering of innumerable wills, granting it a certain level of sentience. If the old principal had released it after sensing the grave danger he was in, instructing it to remain hidden and only appear in the presence of master teachers. That was a viable explanation as well. As such, the appearance of the principal's seal wasn't sufficient evidence to determine whether the old principal was still alive or not. After a moment of hesitation, school head Mo said, Mu Shi, where is the ancient domain that you spoke of? Can you tell us so that we can head over to take a look? No matter what, the old principal had been a friend to them for several hundred years. Knowing that there was a possibility that the other party could still be alive, they had to take a look regardless of the situation. Otherwise, their hearts would never be at peace. This is precisely the reason I gathered all of you here today. Mu Shi looked at the crowd and said, based on our prior scouting, it is very likely that the ancient domain will open once more within a month. Thus, I hope to invite all of you to join the expedition. There are two main aims to this expedition. Firstly, we aim to find the old principal, and if he is still alive, we will attempt to save him. Secondly, the otherworldly demonic tribe has been rather active recently, and we suspect that it might be closely tied to the ancient domain. Upon hearing those words, school head Mo's eyes lit up, and he immediately replied without any hesitation. We will join the expedition. However, after saying those words, he realized that he was getting ahead of himself, so he hurriedly turned to Zhang Xian and asked, Principal Zhang. School head Mo is right. We have to go to the ancient domain to express the stand of our Hongyuan Master Teacher Academy, Zhang Xian replied. Back at the Mausoleum of Principals, when he heard the message left behind by the old principal, he had already made up his mind to take a look at the ancient domain. The incident with the otherworldly demonic tribe at the subterranean gallery only served to strengthen his determination. No matter what, he had to take a look. Otherwise, it would be hard for him to rest at ease. Good. What about the others? Seemingly having known that this would be the outcome, Mu Shi wasn't surprised in the least. He turned his gazes to the other three principals. Since the otherworldly demonic tribe is involved in this matter, it is only right for us to stand up and offer our help too. Wu Tianqiong, Shen Pingchao, and Wu Ran nodded in agreement. How can our combat master hall remain idle before such a situation? Liao Song chuckled. Good, we have everyone on board then. In 1 month, we will meet up at the ancient domain. Allow me to make things clear first. This expedition to the ancient domain will be very dangerous, or else Zhang Yinqiu and the others wouldn't have fallen in it. Even our headquarters don't have much information about it at the moment. There is a very good chance that we might be unable to return from this expedition, Mu Shi said. We understand that. The crowd nodded. Good. It's settled then. Seeing that the crowd had agreed to it without any hesitation, Mu Shi was just about to seal the deal when Wu Rufeng, who had been watching the situation by the side, abruptly spoke up. Due to the dangers regarding the expedition to the ancient domain, the minimum cultivation to join the team is Saint Realm. Since Principal Zhang is only at Nascent Saint, it will be best for you to sit out on this one. Otherwise, you will just end up dragging everyone down. Me? Zhang Xian frowned. His cultivation might only be at Nascent Saint, but if he were to exert his full strength, he could easily subdue a Saint Realm 1 Dan pinnacle cultivator. Furthermore, he possessed many life-saving means. To go a step further, even if everyone in this room were to attack him at this instant, he was confident that the side who would emerge victorious in the fight would be him. Despite knowing nothing at all, this fellow had said that he would drag everyone else down. Wasn't this 7-star high-tier master teacher being too presumptuous? Noticing the displeased expression on his senior uncle's face, Mu Shi sent a telepathic message over. Senior uncle, Wu Shi, is a little supercilious, so do bear with him a little. Supercilious? Indeed. Even though Yu Su's betrayal has nothing to do with senior uncle, you were reflected as the principal during the investigation, so, he felt that you have failed in your responsibilities because of the matter. Furthermore, your age and cultivation are indeed considerably low as compared to the other principals, so it can't be helped that he has a negative opinion of you, Mu Shi explained. Zhang Xian shook his head helplessly with a bitter smile. It seemed like this fellow had been seated on a high position for far so long that he had become a little detached from common sense. A subordinate's fault, in a way, could be considered the fault of the leader as well, but Yu Su's betrayal had happened 2 years ago, whereas it had only been 4 months since Zhang Xian had enrolled into the Master Teacher Academy and met Yu Su. It was one thing for him to not be rewarded for capturing Yu Su, but to pin the blame on him on top of that. Zhang Xian couldn't help recalling a certain prevalent work culture in his previous world. Whenever a problem cropped up, the leader would capture a scapegoat to take the blame so as to display his authority and wisdom. At this moment, it seemed like he was that very goat. If it had been anyone else, there was no way they would have dared refute the accusation from a 7-star high-tier master teacher. However, Zhang Xian wasn't one to let others accuse him like that. He turned his gaze toward Wu Shi and said, "You are Wu Rufeng, right? Audacious. How dare a lower-ranked master teacher address a higher-ranked master teacher by his name? Where are your manners?" Not expecting Principal Zhang to speak to him in such a manner, Wu Shi's face darkened. "Where are my manners?" Chuckling softly, Zhang Xian placed his hands behind his back and gazed at Wu Shi impassively. "May I ask, what is Wu Shi's relationship to Mu Shi?" With eyes narrowed menacingly, Wu Shi harumphed coldly. "Mu Shi and I are both 7-star master teachers, so naturally, we are considered peers. As fellow 7-star master teachers from the Qingyuan Empire Master Teacher Pavilion, they were naturally peers." Peers? Good. Following which, Zhang Xian turned his gaze to Mu Shi and asked, "Little Hong Wan, how do you address me?" "Senior uncle." Mu Shi replied honestly. "You heard that. Since you and Mu Shi are fellow peers, and he addresses me as his senior uncle, that goes to say that you are a generation younger than me. As so, is there any reason I shouldn't call you Wu Rufeng? Or, could it be that you don't think that it is sufficiently intimate for me to address you by your full name?" At which, Zhang Xian pondered for a brief moment before adding, "Since that's the case, what do you think of Little Feng?" Hearing the two words, Little Feng, Wu Shi nearly spurted blood and fainted on the spot. "You." He hurriedly turned to Mu Shi to see if the latter was speaking the truth. After all, it was illogical for a 7-star master teacher to address a 6-star master teacher as his senior uncle. Knowing what Wu Shi intended to ask, Mu Shi answered honestly, "Principal Zhang's teacher is my grand teacher, so going by seniority, he is indeed my senior uncle." This. Wu Shi's face turned livid. Etiquette and seniority were very important to master teachers. Principal Zhang might not have been anything much, but if his teacher was very senior, he would share a high standing as well. Just take Kong Shi's students for example, even if they were completely ignorant and powerless, a 9-star master teacher would still have to humbly address them as senior. This was simply one of the rules. Wu Shi had intended to teach the other party a lesson, but who would have thought that he would become the other party's junior all of the sudden? He couldn't help but feel incredibly stifled within. Chapter 973, Defeating Zhuo Shi with a single finger. "So, am I qualified to call you Wu Rufeng?" Zhang Xian asked calmly. "I." Wu Shi wanted to refute those words, but unable to find a counterargument to that, his face turned redder and redder. Eventually, he waved his hand and said, "Relying solely on your seniority won't earn you the respect of anyone. What is more important is the contribution that you have made to the Master Teacher Pavilion and mankind. No matter how formidable your teacher may be, if you aren't able to contribute anything to mankind, there is no way you can gain the respect of anyone. You can't possibly expect to rely on your teacher forever." Contribution. Indeed. Only those who work diligently to give back to mankind are truly worthy of respect. Wu Shi said with his head raised up high. A master teacher wouldn't gain the respect of others just because he was highly ranked or powerful. Take Yu Su for example, he was a 6-star pinnacle master teacher, as well as an esteemed vice school head of the Master Teacher Academy. But as a traitor of humanity, there was no way anyone would respect him. Looking at Wu Shi's proud demeanor and boastful tone, Zhang Xian said, "Judging from your tone, you seem to have contributed a lot to mankind." "Indeed. I killed my first otherworldly demon when I was 16, and to date, I have slain a total of 47 otherworldly demons at Chrysalis Realm and beyond. All in all, I have accumulated a total of 22 contribution points for mankind." Wu Shi harumphed proudly with an air of superiority and grandiose, 22 contribution points. That's incredible. As expected of Vice Pavilion Master Wu. With that many contribution points, he is definitely ranked among the top in Qingyuan Conferred Kingdom. A 7-star high-tier master teacher sure is fearsome. Upon hearing those words, the eyes of Combat Master Liao, Combat Master Zhuo, Wu Tianqiong, and the others lit up in respect and admiration. Even school head Imo couldn't help but be awed by it, and his impression of Wu Shi changed as well. Uncomprehending of the significance of the numbers, Zhang Xian turned to school head Zhao Bingxiu and asked, 22 contribution points. What does that mean? Seeing that their principal wasn't too sure what was going on, Zhao Bingxiu explained discreetly, killing an otherworldly demon counts as a contribution, saving mankind also counts as a contribution. Each contribution has its own extent of significance. In order to better measure contributions, the Master Teacher Pavilion has to quantify them. This was a system that was implemented only within the Master Teacher Pavilion headquarters, and the Master Teacher Academy didn't abide by it. Thus, there weren't any books regarding the topic in the Academy's libraries. Hearing those words, Zhang Xian nodded. According to what he knew, it was possible to exchange one's contribution for artifacts at the Master Teacher Pavilion. If there was no method to quantify one's contribution, it would be hard to maintain the system efficiently. For one, it would be hard to determine if one's contribution was sufficient to exchange for an artifact. After all, the Master Teacher Pavilion couldn't simply give out rare artifacts to individuals who had barely done anything at all. Coming to that realization, Zhang Xian continued his querying. How are the contribution points derived? Zhao Bingxiu pondered for a moment before replying. Regarding the distribution of contribution points, the Master Teacher Pavilion has a set of guidelines and regulations to determine how it should be tabulated. I don't really know much about the details either, but your previous accomplishment of taming all of the saint beasts and spirit beasts of the Cloud Mist Ridge, sparing mankind from an impending crisis. After we reported it to the Master Teacher Pavilion headquarters, they tabulated it to be worth around 5 contribution points. Only 5 points? Zhang Xian was astounded. The 9 kings of the Cloud Mist Ridge had a cultivation of Saint One Dan Pinnacle, and there were many other nascent saint, half-saint, and chrysalis realm spirit beasts among them as well. He had tamed so many of them, but to think that they were only worth 5 contribution points. Considering that the other party had 22, that was indeed rather formidable. Indeed. Even though the beasts of the Cloud Mist Ridge are violent, they stayed cooped up within the mountain most of the time, only raising beast stampedes once in a blue moon. Furthermore, the Master Teacher Academy is stationed there, which minimized the threat they posed. As a result, the contribution from your actions was perceived to be lower, Zhao Bingxiu said a little awkwardly. He was a little surprised when he heard that Principal Zhang had only received this many contribution points after taming so many saint beasts and spirit beasts, so he had asked about the matter. That was the exact answer he had received. The extent of the contribution wasn't determined by how formidable one's feat was, but by how much one had actually contributed to mankind. Hearing those words, Zhang Xian nodded. The killings conducted by the beasts of the Cloud Mist Ridge was done extremely discreetly, such that even Zhao Bingxiu and the others didn't know much about it. They also thought that those beasts had only camped on the mountain, rarely conducting any acts of aggression against humans. Due to the Bluehorn Dragon beast and Vicious being involved in this matter, Zhang Xian had instructed school head Mo not to speak of this matter to another. Naturally, the headquarters were unaware of this matter, so the contribution points awarded to him were less than initially expected. Wu Shi, senior uncle, is still young. Given his talent and capability, it is just a matter of time before he makes a great contribution to humanity. Besides, he was the one who captured Yu Su and exposed his facade, ridding mankind of a black sheep. Mu Shi tried to ease the tension in the room. He wasn't aware of the matter regarding the Cloud Mist Ridge, but the capture of Yu Su, a traitor of humanity, would surely count as Zhang Xian's contribution as well. Capturing Yu Su. Humph, does this contribution even add up to a single point? Wu Shi smirked coldly. This. It happens to add up to a single point, Mu Shi replied awkwardly. Hee hee. Wu Shi sneered coldly before turning to Zhang Xian once more. Principal Zhang, Just as you can see, no matter how capable as your teacher is, you still need to depend on yourself to win the respect of others. You should just stay here. The expedition to the ancient domain will be extremely dangerous. We aren't going there to play. There won't be anyone to take care of you. I fear that you might meet with danger if you head there. Zhang Xian scratched his head. Considering that he was only at nascent Saint Pinnacle, it was indeed very dangerous for him to head to an ancient domain where even a 7-star master teacher could possibly lose his life. It wasn't completely unreasonable for the other party to not want to bring him along. Just that. To judge a person's strength solely by their cultivation, wasn't the other party jumping to conclusions a little too fast? With such thoughts in mind, Zhang Xian looked at Wu Shi and chuckled softly. Since that is the case, may I know if Combat Master Zhua is qualified to join the expedition? As 100-men commander of the Combat Master Hall and a Saint Tu Dan spiritual perception realm expert, Combat Master Zhua is naturally qualified to join the expedition. Wu Shi replied. I see. Zhang Xian's lips curled up as he turned to Zhuo Qingfeng with a bright smile. Combat Master Zhua, are you free? It happens that I managed to achieve a breakthrough recently, and I would like to find someone to spar with. You want to spar with me? Zhuo Qingfeng was taken aback. After a moment of hesitation, he nodded. Since Principal Zhang is in the mood, I am more than willing to accompany you. Honestly speaking, after having 2 parties from the Combat Master Hall decimated by the students of the young man before him, he had been wanting to see the young man's strength for himself. However, it was a pity that the other party was often not around, so he hadn't been able to find an opportunity to do so. Since this was a rare opportunity for him to test the other party's strength, his interest was immediately piqued. In any case, no matter how formidable Principal Zhang might have been, he was only at nascent Saint Pinnacle. As a Saint Tu Dan expert, he didn't think that he would lose to the other party. Alright, let's begin. Zhang Xian said with a smile, and he took a nimble step to the center of the room. You want to spar here? Zhuo Qingfeng was taken aback. If we fight here, won't the shockwaves of our battle cause this assembly room to collapse? As spacious as the assembly room seemed, if the might of his Saint Realm Tu Dan cultivation were to leak out, it could easily devastate the entire area. It would be embarrassing if he collapsed the Elder Hall by accident. Don't worry, there is no such risk. The battle will end quickly. Zhang Xian replied with a smile. End quickly. A frown emerged on Zhuo Qingfeng's face as his complexion turned awful. Since Principal Zhang insists on it, I won't stand on ceremony. Zhuo Qingfeng flicked his wrist and took out a sword before harumphing coldly. Draw your weapon. Weapon? Zhang Xian shook his head. There is no need to go through that much trouble. Let's begin. After his golden origin core's metamorphosis into a violet origin core, the fighting prowess he could display had been enhanced more than 2-fold. In his current state, even a Saint Tu Dan opponent was nothing to him. Don't blame me if you get hurt then. Seeing how the other party was even more arrogant than his student, refusing to even draw his weapon against him, Zhuo Qingfeng's face turned incredibly livid. With a swift flick of his wrist, he charged forward to make the first move. This time, he didn't suppress his cultivation. Exerting the full might of a Saint Tu Dan spiritual perception realm cultivator, his Jinqi burst forth from his body and ravaged the surroundings. In an instant, a sound reminiscent of the crazy rumbling of thunder sounded. How powerful! School head Imo, school head Zhao, and the others paled in fright. Even Wu Tianqiong and the others couldn't help but narrow their eyes in alarm. While they did possess higher cultivation than Zhuo Qingfeng, in a true duel, they had no doubt that they would be the ones to be defeated in the end. Principal Zhang was only at nascent Saint Pinnacle, 2 whole cultivation realms weaker than Zhuo Qingfeng, so how could he possibly even stand his ground against the latter? With such thoughts in mind, everyone hurriedly turned their gazes to Zhang Xian, only to see the latter standing with a composed smile on his face against Zhuo Qingfeng's powerful swordsmanship, clearly devoid of any intention to dodge at all. Humph! Realizing that he was being looked down upon, rage flickered across Zhuo Qingfeng's eyes as he leaped forward to strike. A cold, sharp glint flashed across the area before a sword whizzed right for Zhang Xian's chest, as if a venomous snake. Since this was a spar, Zhuo Qingfeng didn't intend to land a fatal blow. Nevertheless, if Zhang Xian were to be caught in the attack, he would surely suffer severe injuries under the onslaught of the sharp sword qi and rampaging zhenqi. He. Watching as the other party's sword swiftly approached him, Zhang Xian chuckled. In the moment that the sword was just about to pierce his chest, Zhang Xian raised 2 fingers and grabbed lightly. Wang! The astounding momentum of Zhuo Qingfeng's sword came to an abrupt halt just like that. As if a snake grabbed at the neck, no matter how Zhuo Qingfeng tugged and pulled, his sword just wouldn't budge. This. Zhuo Qingfeng's eyes narrowed in astonishment. Grabbing a sword empty-handed was no easy feat. To achieve this feat, one had to possess not only an outstanding eye of discernment and a precise grasp of timing in combat, but most importantly of all, formidable strength. As a combat master, Zhuo Qingfeng's strength was far greater than other spiritual perception realm cultivators. For his strongest sword art to be stopped with a simple pinch of 2 fingers. How could this possibly happen? In the midst of Zhuo Qingfeng's shock, the young man opposite to him abruptly released his grip on the sword and flicked the blade of it lightly. Boom! An immense might tore through the sword and struck Zhuo Qingfeng, forcing him to retreat 8 steps. Every single step he took left a deep footprint in the ground. Yet, those 8 steps were still insufficient for him to neutralize the relentless might from Zhang Xian's flick, so he chose to leap up in hopes that it could further thin the might. Pang! However, Zhuo Qingfeng was still underestimating the might of the flick. The leap he took sent him crashing straight into a pillar in the assembly room, and with a reddened face, he spurted a mouthful of blood. It was only then that the might finally dissipated. Swiftly withdrawing his sword, Zhuo Qingfeng walked up to the young man before him and clasped his fist. Principal Zhang, thank you for going easy on me. Had the other party not held back, he might have been smashed into a lump of meat paste earlier. It was no wonder Zhen Yang and Wei Ruyan were so monstrously powerful. It turned out that their teacher was a real monster. To think that a day would come which he, a Saint Tu Dan combat master, would lose to a nascent saint. You are being too kind. Zhang Xian's purpose was only to display his strength. It would suffice to make in his point. After trading a few pleasantries with Zhuo Qingfeng, he turned to Wu Shi and asked, So, is someone of my strength qualified to join the expedition? Chapter 974, Wu Shi's embarrassment. Witnessing that, Wu Shi's eyebrows shot up. This. For a nascent Saint Master teacher to defeat a Saint Tu Dan combat master barehanded, this was way too fearsome. On top of that, just a moment ago, he had mocked the other party's strength. Who could have thought that the other party would defeat combat master Zhuo the very next moment? This was a direct slap to his face. Based on the intelligence we have so far, there are many otherworldly demonic tribe experts in the ancient domain. Even a 6-star pinnacle master teacher like Yu Su was unable to stand his ground against them. What makes you so confident that you will be able to stand against them? Wu Shi placed his hands behind his back and gazed at Zhang Xian coldly. With a challenging tone, he questioned, Have you fought an otherworldly demon before? Do you know how fearsome they are? Have you even seen an otherworldly demon before? Zhang Xian was just about to respond, but the 7-star master teacher before them waved his hands again. In my lifetime, I have personally fought and killed 52 of them. Not only are they powerful and capable of challenging opponents stronger than them, more importantly, they exude a heavy killing intent that renders it difficult for anyone to stand against them. Against such enemies, possessing some combat prowess isn't enough. More importantly, you must have tremendous mental fortitude and determination. If you don't have those, you should just remain here. While Wu Shi was indeed picking on Zhang Xian, his concerns weren't entirely illogical. Even if Zhang Xian possessed strong fighting prowess and had the guidance of a formidable teacher, he was ultimately still a 20-year-old young man. There were many geniuses who had lost themselves under the overwhelming pressure emanated by the fearsome otherworldly demons, resulting in unexpected situations. A mistake made by one wouldn't just affect the individual but the entire team. The expedition to the ancient domain was already dangerous as it was, and it would be unwise to bring in another unstable factor. Zhang Xian could tell that Wu Shi wasn't a bad person at heart. The other party had just been in a lofty position for too long, which made him obstinate about his views. Shaking his head, he began to explain, regarding the otherworldly demonic tribe. Halfway through his explanation, however, an elder abruptly rushed into the room. Principal Zhang. The elder rushed forward and clasped his fist. Noticing the peculiar expression on the other party's face, Zhang Xian frowned. Did something happen? That elder hesitated for a moment before speaking. Principal Zhang, School Head Lu. Lu Shi seeks an audience. Due to Lu Feng's conflict with Principal Zhang, he had almost had his license revoked. It was only known among a couple of people, but as an elder of the Master Teacher Academy, he had heard a thing or two about it. Without a doubt, there was bound to be some bad blood between the two of them. As such, he felt a little conflicted reporting Lu Feng's arrival to Principal Zhang. Lu Feng. Unaware of the elder's thoughts, Zhang Xian was taken aback. For a moment he chuckled softly. After leaving the seal, he had tried to look for them but to no avail. From the looks of it, they had managed to get out of the subterranean gallery safely. Invite him in. Zhang Xian waved his hand. Yes. Seeing that Principal Zhang didn't get displeased over this matter, the elder heaved a sigh of relief before hurriedly leaving. Not too long later, the elder returned with an old man walking behind him. Who else could it be other than Lu Feng? The current Lu Feng no longer commanded a sharp disposition about him. There was clarity in his eyes, and he felt more mature and reliable than before. It seemed like the happenings in the subterranean gallery had evoked a significant change in his mental state. Principal Zhang, you are fine. That's good. Seeing the young man sitting safe and sound in the middle of the hall, Lu Feng heaved a sigh of relief. While he had guessed that the other party would be fine after seeing the many corpses of the otherworldly demons, it was still a huge relief to see it with his own eyes. The other party had put himself in great danger to save them. If not for him, their entire team would have died. Of course, I am fine. What about you? Have you all recovered from your wounds yet? Zhang Xian replied with a kind smile. Thank you for your concern, we have recovered fully from our wounds. Principal Zhang, it was only through your courageous efforts that we were to survive that ordeal and avert a potential calamity. Please accept my gratitude. After saying those words, Lu Feng prepared to kneel to the ground. Lu Shi, there is no need to stand on ceremony. Zhang Xian hurriedly rushed forward to help him up. On the other hand, seeing the two men whom they had thought had great enmity between them speaking so amicably to one another, School Head Mo and School Head Zhao glanced at one another in bewilderment. Unable to stand it any longer, School Head Jiang Qingqin asked, what happened? Oh, it is like that. Upon hearing the question, Lu Feng began to explain. 5 days ago, Principal Zhang went down to the subterranean gallery and saved all 40 of us 6-star master teachers who were stationed there. At the same time, he personally slew more than 200 Saint Realm otherworldly demons, including 2 Saint 4 Dan Kings. I have already reported this matter to the headquarters, and I just received a response from them. I was intending to report this matter to the Master Teacher Academy so as to not allow Principal Zhang's contribution to go unnoticed, but I didn't expect Principal Zhang to have already returned. Principal Zhang went down to the subterranean gallery. Saved 46-star master teachers. Slew more than 200 Saint Realm otherworldly demons, and this included their kings as well. Hearing those words, the surroundings immediately fell silent. Wu Shi, who had just been authoritatively voicing his doubts about Zhang Xian's capability, widened his eyes and nearly fainted on the spot. He had just said that the other party hadn't even seen an otherworldly demon before, and this Lu Feng arrived a moment later to say that the other party had killed more than 200 of them. Was this for real? One must know that even he, a Saint 4 Dan expert, hadn't killed that many yet. And most importantly of all, there were 2 kings among them. It went without saying that each of the otherworldly demon kings possessed fearsome might. Even a Saint 4 Dan master teacher like him would be no match for an otherworldly demon king. Yet, based on what Lu Feng was saying, it seemed like Principal Zhang had not only survived an encounter with them, but he had even killed 2 of them. Just the notion of it left his mind completely blank. Wu Shi turned to Lu Feng and asked grimly, "Is what you are saying true?" "It is the utmost truth, I can guarantee it with my life." Lu Feng nodded. Furthermore, the headquarters have already investigated and confirmed the matter after we reported to them, and they have already converted Principal Zhang's contribution into contribution points. The reason I am here today is to hand them over to Principal Zhang. After saying those words, Lu Feng flicked his wrist, took out a jade token with a faint yellow hue, and presented it to Zhang Xian. "Principal Zhang, you faced great danger to slay so many otherworldly demons and save us. We can't allow your deeds to go unnoticed. The headquarters made an evaluation based on the situation then and awarded you with 1211 contribution points." "Oh, 1,000 points." Wu Shi's body trembled, and he nearly spurted blood. He had slain his first otherworldly demon when he was 16, and it had been several hundred years since then. He had never slacked in his effort of hunting down otherworldly demons, but the contribution points he had accrued over so many years only added up to 22 points. This should have been a record that any master teacher would feel proud of, and countless would gasp in wonderment at. So, he had used it to mock Principal Zhang, but who could have known that, in the blink of an eye, the other party would suddenly be awarded more than 1,000 points? Could there be anything more exaggerated than that? Even if the other party had slain more than 200 Saint Realm otherworldly demons and 2 kings, it shouldn't have added up to that much. Wu Shi wasn't the only one who harbored such doubts. The others in the room thought the same as well. As if having seen through their thoughts, Lu Feng explained, "These otherworldly demons entered the subterranean gallery through paying a heavy price to breach the seal between both worlds. They shouldered an important mission, and had they succeeded, Hongyuan Empire could very well have faced extinction. Principal Zhang's act of slaying them has effectively foiled their ploy, preventing them from carrying out a devastating massacre. This is a huge merit, and even 1,000 contribution points can hardly match up to what he has done." This. Everyone pondered for a moment before nodding in agreement. Indeed, slaying a few hundred otherworldly demons couldn't exactly be considered a huge merit, but if one had foiled their ploy by doing so and saved countless lives, that would be a different matter. Paying no heed to the crowd's shock, Lu Feng continued. "There is also one more matter that the headquarters have yet to confirm for the time being. However, they are already checking on it, and once it is confirmed, it could very well earn Principal Zhang tens of thousands or even 100,000 contribution points." Tens of thousands or 100,000 contribution points. Just what kind of huge merit can earn one so many contribution points? Mu Shi asked in agitation. Even slaying a Saint Realm otherworldly demon might not even earn one a single point. Through this, it could easily be seen how difficult it was to earn contribution points. To earn 1,000 contribution points out of the blue was already inconceivable. Just what could it be that could allow Principal Zhang to earn tens of thousands or 100,000 contribution points after confirmation? Mu Shi wasn't the only one who was shocked by the matter. Wu Shi, school head Mo, and the others also had confused looks on their faces, unable to make heads or tails of the situation. "It is like this. We entered the subterranean gallery earlier and found that the seal severing the space to the otherworldly battlefield had been repaired. If I am not mistaken, that must be Principal Zhang's doing, right?" Lu Feng raised his gaze and looked at Zhang Xian. As long as the seal remained damaged, the otherworldly demon would have been able to continue their invasion. Thus, I spent a few days to fix the seal using a secret art that my teacher once imparted to me. Zhang Xian nodded. As I thought. Lu Feng's eyes lit up. Having stayed in the subterranean gallery for 3 months, he had already learned about the damage suffered by the seal. Knowing that this invasion wasn't an exception and there would be many more to come, he had prepared himself to spend his entire life fighting in the subterranean gallery to protect mankind. Yet, who could have known that when he took another look at it, it was already completely repaired. Their group of master teachers had been together throughout the entire duration, and there was no way the otherworldly demonic tribe would shoot themselves in the foot. Thus, the only one who could have done it was Principal Zhang. Furthermore, the seal had a complex structure that even had the laws of space tied into it. None of them had the ability to repair the seal either. However, if it was the miracle workshop, Principal Zhang, who had done it, then it would all make sense. That was why he was rather certain about the matter. Repairing the seal meant eliminating the possibility of an assault by the otherworldly demonic tribe through the subterranean gallery once and for all. This was an immensely large merit. Even 100,000 contribution points seemed meager in comparison. As for what the outcome would be, the headquarters would come to a decision after they were done surveying the situation. Doesn't the seal involve the laws of space as well? Principal Zhang was actually able to fix it. If it is really true, Principal Zhang really has contributed greatly to mankind this time. How did he do it? Hearing the conversation of the duo, the crowd was stunned. The haughty and authoritative Wu Shi from a moment ago looked as if he had been struck by a bolt of lightning. Right. Principal Zhang, did you just return from the subterranean gallery? I have been keeping a close eye on the seal, and it was still damaged the previous time I was there, Lu Feng suddenly asked out of curiosity. He had gone to the seal to search for Zhang Xian at one point, and it had still been damaged then. However, when he checked on it just a moment ago, it had already been completely repaired. I only left the subterranean gallery an hour ago, Zhang Xian replied with a bitter smile. Look, I haven't even had a chance to change out of my clothes yet. Shortly after I returned from the subterranean gallery after braving through danger to slay a few hundred otherworldly demons and save Hongyuan Empire, the assembly bell chimed, so I had to rush over without any time to clean up or rest. Yet, I was actually accused of showing a lack of respect. Don't you think that is very absurd? Hearing those words, Wu Shi's face turned completely red, and in that moment, he desperately wished that he could find a hole in the ground to hide in. Chapter 975, Zhang Xian wants to organize an exchange visit as a 7-star high-tier master teacher. Wu Shi was more than glad to see talented fresh blood in the master teacher pavilion. However, his rage at Yusu's betrayal had given him a bad impression of the new principal, which was also the reason he had snubbed Zhang Xian right from the start. On top of that, Zhang Xian was also a little too young to have become the principal of a master teacher academy. Achieving success too early in life tended to result in complacency, and that could be a particularly dangerous trait for a master teacher. He felt that a little bit of suffering to quell the other party's pride and temper his state of mind could go a long way. He had thought that he would be able to easily make the other party learn that the world was larger than he thought and that there was always a man greater than the other. Yet, he had become the one learning that there was a man greater than the other instead. Just the thought of it left him feeling stifled within. Wu Shi shook his head with a bitter smile. It is no wonder he was able to become a principal at his age and win Wu Shi's praise and respect, inducing the latter to willingly address him as senior uncle. He sure isn't an ordinary person. He had always respected those who had made great contributions to humanity, and the young man before him had personally descended into the subterranean gallery despite his esteemed position as the principal and rescued 46-star master teachers, slain hundreds of otherworldly demons, and repaired the seal. Any of those three were feats worthy of respect. Knowing all this, Wu Shi decided to put aside his airs and apologized earnestly. Principal Zhang, I shouldn't have jumped to conclusions without trying to understand the situation. I ask you forgive me for my previous offense. Master teachers valued etiquette, and a mistake was a mistake. Even if he was a 7-star high-tier master teacher, it was only right for him to admit his mistake wherever he had erred. Wu Shi is being too polite, we are fellow master teachers working for mankind. Considering how dangerous the expedition will be, it is only right for you to act prudently. Zhang Xian nodded. I am glad you didn't take it to heart. Wu Shi also nodded. Putting aside the matter, he continued the discussion regarding the expedition. Alright, since we have decided that everyone will be joining in the expedition, we shall meet in 1 month at Firesource City. Firesource City. Based on Yusu's account and the scouting done by our Master Teacher Pavilion, the entrance to the ancient domain is located in the vicinity of Firesource City, Wu Shi replied. The map of Hongyuan Empire came into his mind, and Zhang Xian asked to confirm. If I recall correctly, Firesource City is located near the boundary of Hongyuan Empire, close to the Saint Ascension platform, right? Due to the close proximity between Firesource City and the Saint Ascension platform, only a distance of several hundred kilometers, there were many pilgrims who would drop by for a short stay. As such, it had quite a prosperous economy. Yes, it is a city close to the Saint Ascension platform, Wu Shi replied. The Saint Ascension platform is the ground where Kong Shi ascended to sainthood, and the ancient domain is located close to it. Perhaps, there might be a connection between the two, but it is still too early to make any assumptions. We don't have enough information. The crowd nodded. Anything relating to Kong Shi shouldn't be spoken of easily without any concrete proof. Speaking of the Saint Ascension platform, I must speak about something that happened just a while ago. Wu Shi chuckled softly as he turned his gaze to the crowd. Kong Shi left behind his writings on the Saint Ascension platform, and 3 months ago, someone actually uncovered the true meaning behind those words, causing a huge ruckus then. Honestly speaking, I would really love to meet the expert who received Kong Shi's acknowledgement. If possible, I would like to acknowledge him as my teacher and learn from him. As Wu Shi spoke, the admiration in his eyes deepened. Halfway through his words, he suddenly noticed that Wu Ran's face had reddened to the point that it seemed like it would blow up at any moment. Displeased with the other party's reaction, he frowned. Principal Wu, is there something wrong? If I remember correctly, you are the leader of the Saint Ascension Circle, aren't you? After so many years of research, you were unable to figure out the true meaning of Kong Shi's writing. Yet, someone else actually succeeded in doing so. Don't you think that it is an incredible feat? Cough cough. Wu Ran's eyes flew around the place. Unable to take it anymore, he said, Wu Shi, the expert who deciphered Kong Shi's writing, is right before you. Right before me. Taken aback, Wu Shi's eyes widened in astonishment. Who is it? It is, the person you said put on airs, Principal Zhang, Wu Ran said with a complicated expression. Principal Zhang. Wu Shi staggered on the spot, and he nearly fainted from the heavy shock. You must be joking with me. A nascent saint actually managed to find mistakes in Kong Shi's writing? Zhang Xian also felt a little awkward, not knowing what to make of the situation. The person you are speaking of, does indeed seem to be me. What is this? The man who put me down as if I was nothing a moment ago is actually saying that he wants to acknowledge me as his teacher. Sigh, these must be the problems that a person too outstanding faces all the time. What a dilemma. For several thousand years, everyone thought that there couldn't be a single mistake in Kong Shi's writing, so they cultivated strictly according to it. You are the man who found the mistake in it and courageously questioned it publicly. This. Wu Shi's lips trembled in frenzy. As a 7-star high-tier master teacher, he had thought that he would be able to easily teach the new principal of the Hongyuan Master Teacher Academy a lesson for his lapse of responsibility regarding Yusu's matter so as to send out a stern warning to him. Who could have known that he would be the one who was taught a lesson instead? For so many years, there had not been a person who dared doubt Kong Shi's words. Even thinking about it was blasphemous to them. This notion had become far too ingrained in their minds to change. This was precisely why, when they heard that someone actually voiced doubts regarding the Kong Shi's writing in the Saint Ascension platform, they had been extremely shocked. This was equivalent to challenging a prevalent mindset that had dominated the master-teacher continent for many, many years, as well as challenging Kong Shi's authority. He had thought a person possessing the courage to do so would at least be a Saint 3 Dan or 4 Dan expert, a person who had a deep understanding of sainthood. Who would have thought that it would turn out to be a 20-year-old man whom he had just lectured a moment ago? It could be said that the shock the other party had given him today was far more than what he had suffered in his entire life. At this point, he felt that he should start rethinking life. Seeing how shocked the other party was, Zhang Xian shook his head. It's nothing much. Kong Shi was ultimately still a mortal. There is no mortal who doesn't make mistakes. There was no man in the world who was infallible, and sages weren't any exception to the rule. Why you? Upon hearing these words, everyone's face paled. Wu Shi even hurriedly closed his palm to seal the surroundings with his jinqi, fearing that those words would have been overheard by others. Principal Zhang, Kong Shi is the world's teacher. His affairs mustn't be spoken of so lightly. Noticing that their principal was unaware of the convention, school head Mo hurriedly sent a telepathic message over to advise him. Oh. Zhang Xian scratched his head. He had only just recalled a moment ago that in this world, a lower-ranked master teacher was forbidden from speaking about the affairs of a higher-ranked master teacher easily. It was also thanks to this very rule that no other master teacher dared to look into his other persona, Yang Xian. As the world's teacher, the founder of the Master Teacher Pavilion, Kong Shi was naturally an existence that one shouldn't speak lightly of. If it was found that Zhang Xian had spoken of him disrespectfully, he would be criticized by many master teachers. In fact, it was not entirely impossible for him to be killed on the spot for his rudeness. Those of the master teacher continent had been brought up to respect their teachers, and the word teacher held an exceptional position in each of their hearts. On the other hand, Zhang Xian still retained the modern thinking he had in his previous life, so it was only natural that many would find it hard to accept his different line of thoughts. It seemed like he really had to pay more attention to such matters in the future. Otherwise, if others were to use such an incident against him, he could be really put into a spot. I apologize for my prior faux pas. Please do not take it to heart, Zhang Xian apologized. School head Mo quickly reacted with a soft chuckle. Principal Zhang, what are you referring to? I didn't hear anything at all. Indeed, we didn't hear anything either. The others nodded in agreement. Since it was a matter regarding Kong Shi, it was best to play a fool and act as if they hadn't heard anything at all. Firstly, it was to avoid the fire from getting on them as well. Secondly, they could avoid offending the talented Principal Zhang. In order to alleviate the awkward atmosphere, Liao Song asked, Principal Zhang, your other two students, Wang Ying and Lu Yang, intend to challenge the trial of our combat master hall as well. When do you think it will be convenient for them? It will be best for them to do it as fast as possible so that we can return soon. Let's hold the trial tomorrow then. At this point, Zhang Xian hesitated for a moment before speaking once more. Also, there is a faction in our academy known as the Xianxian faction. If it is not too much trouble, I hope to bring them to your combat master hall in the future so as to broaden their horizon. They will be able to interact and learn from one another. It was impossible to become an expert by cultivating in isolation. The combat master hall was filled with experts, and if the Xianxian faction could interact with them, they would be able to broaden their horizons and learn about many new things. That would be beneficial to their growth in the future. Zhang Xian had been contemplating this issue for the past few days, and since Liao Song was there, it was a good opportunity to broach this subject. Xianxian faction, interaction. Recalling what they had undergone 2 days ago, when they had just entered the academy, Liao Song's face paled and his heart jolted in terror. Even just hearing the word Xianxian could easily send shivers up his spine at this point. If it had been a normal interaction, it could be beneficial for the members of the Combat Master Hall as well. After all, everyone had their own unique interpretation of combat, and perhaps the insights that the students had could serve as a source of inspiration for their members. However, it was the Xianxian faction they were talking about here. If that group of tens of thousands of monsters were to visit their Combat Master Hall, would their members lose all faith and confidence? Looking at the deep frown on Liao Song's face, an expression that looked as if he had eaten 2 of salted vegetables, Zhang Xian asked worriedly, "What's wrong? Am I putting you on the spot?" "It's not that." Gritting his teeth, Liao Song said, "It's like this. Our Combat Master Hall branch is located in Qingyuan Empire, which is more than a month's journey from here. The reason I was able to arrive quickly is because I was in proximity to Hongyuan City when I received Zhuo Qingfeng's message. The ancient domain will be opening in a month. Why don't we talk about it once more after we survive the expedition?" Qingyuan Empire was a significant distance away from Hongyuan Empire. Even if one rode on a saint beast, it would still be a journey of many days. "You're right. Since that's the case, why don't I just show you and your members to them later on so that you can interact with one another? Those fellows really can use some of your men's pointers. Also, this will also be a good opportunity for them to see the true experts in this world so that they don't become complacent," Zhang Xian said with a smile. The fellows of the Xianxian faction had also listened to his lecture, but they hadn't really internalized his teachings through practical combat yet. If they could spar with the experts of the Combat Master Hall, they would be able to improve by leaps and bounds. Pointers? True experts? Hearing those words, Liao Song's lips twitched, and he nearly blacked out on the spot. We might be considered experts before others, but to the freaks of the Xianxian faction. Expert your head. We were completely crushed by the Xianxian faction right after we entered the academy, so what pointers could we possibly offer them? You must be joking. It is an interesting notion, but I think we will pass on it. Liao Song waved his hand and turned it down awkwardly. It's just a normal interaction. Or does Combat Master Liao think that the students of our academy are too weak and are unworthy of your guidance? Zhang Xian asked with a frown. He was unaware of the traumatic experience that Combat Master Liao had gone through, and this was a rare opportunity for the Xianxian faction to meet and interact with combat masters too, so he wanted to vie for this opportunity for his students. Besides, the combat masters specialized in fighting. Shouldn't they be eager to join in, especially since it was a rare chance for them to display their skills? That's not it. Liao Song waved his hands. It's settled then. It's just a normal spar to learn from one another, nothing bad will come of it. However, I will have to ask your combat masters to go easy on my students so as to not traumatize them too much, Zhang Xian said affirmatively with a bright smile on his lips. All right then. Looking at the sincere and earnest face, Liao Song could tell that the other party wasn't attempting to humiliate him. Left with no choice, he could only nod in agreement with despair reflected in the depths of his eyes. Well, on the bright side, the interaction could help to raise the fighting prowess of their combat masters too if they could survive the ordeal. Chapter 976. Arriving at the Xianxian faction after confirming the matter with the other party, Zhang Xian turned to Zhao Bingshu and instructed, "School head Zhao, make some preparations. We shall construct a flying ship for our academy." Zhao Bingshu nodded. The construction of a flying ship was a huge project, but there were tens of thousands of students in the blacksmith school. With all of them working simultaneously, it wouldn't take too long to finish it. The only reason Hongyuan still didn't have one to date was due to their lack of saint beasts to drive it. However, having tamed the 9 kings of the Cloud Mist Ridge, as well as many other half-saint and nascent saint beasts, they had sufficient beast power to drive the flying ship. Since Zhang Xian intended to take the members of the Xianxian faction to Qingyuan Empire to conduct an exchange with the Combat Master Hall, it was infeasible to fly them over on spirit beasts. Who knew how many trips it would take to fly them there and back? If they could obtain a flying ship, that would make things much easier. After settling the matter, the crowd chatted for a moment longer. Fire Source City is around a week's journey away from here. The ancient domain hasn't opened yet, and there is no point in us arriving there too early either. Since that's the case, why don't we make our own preparations within this period of time and meet up at Fire Source City when the time comes? Wu Shi proposed. That's a good idea. Voices of approval sounded among the crowd. Not only was it pointless for them to arrive at Fire Source City earlier, they might also catch the attention of the otherworldly demons and prompt them to prepare in advance to deal with them, thus resulting in unneeded trouble. Alright then, we will take our leave first. After saying so, Wu Shi and Mu Shi left the assembly room. As the other academies were too far away, Wu Tianxiong and the others decided to remain in Hengyuan for the time being. After arranging for school head Mo to take good care of them, Zhang Xian beckoned for Liao Song, Zhuo Qingfeng, and the other combat masters to gather before bringing them to the Xianxian faction headquarters. Before even arriving at their destination, they could already see plenty of people cultivating and practicing their battle techniques by the side. With just a look, rage bubbled within Zhang Xian, and his face darkened in anger. Unable to take it any longer, he roared furiously, "Stop whatever you are doing and come over. What in the world are you all doing?" As the leader of the Xianxian faction, he had great expectations for it. This was the reason he had lectured them tirelessly and even brought the combat masters over so that they could train with them. He had thought that his hard work would bear him some fruits, but when he came over, these fellows. Just what in the world were they practicing? Their movements were slack and lacking force, and their timing and combat sense were completely lacking. It was as if someone had starved them for days. Were they trying to swat flies? What in the world are they doing? Hearing the bellow, Liao Song, Zhuo Qingfeng, and the others glanced at one another, their eyebrows leaping up in astonishment. In their eyes, the battle techniques that this group of students had been practicing were already plenty fearsome. Why was the other party speaking as if they were making a huge mistake? Weren't his expectations a little too high? At this point, Ruohuan Gongzi, Song Chao, and the others rushed out to greet Zhang Xian. "Principal Zhang. What happened to what I taught you all before leaving?" Zhang Xian roared furiously. "What the heck is this? I put in so much effort into lecturing all of you, but what is it that you all are doing? How disgraceful. We are already practicing very seriously." The faces of Ruohuan Gongzi and the others reddened. "You call this practicing very seriously?" With a deeply disappointed look, Zhang Xian pointed to the few students not too far away and said, "The autumn wind heralding rain you were practicing previously might look impressive, but it is, in truth, an utter joke. What do you need so many feints for? In the first strike, as long you were to just lower your palm by 3 inches, you would have already been able to fell your opponent." After which, Zhang Xian pointed to another student and said, "The emerald leaf swordsmanship that you were practicing a moment ago is clearly an offensive move, but you actually practiced it as a defensive move. It would still have been fine if you actually managed to protect yourself well through that move, but as long as your opponent lowers their posture and attacks your lower body, what do you think will happen? As for your chaotic demon hammering art, it might look powerful and grand on the surface, but in truth, you aren't channeling your Jinqi into your strength well. If one were to find the point where your Jinqi intersects, even without making a move, just a sharp gaze in itself can potentially cause your Jinqi to fall into disarray, thus causing you severe injuries from the backlash. As for that..." Zhang Xian pointed to another 8 more students, and every word he spoke left the pointed student lowering his head in shame. They realized that all of the mistakes pointed out earlier had been covered in Principal Zhang's lecture back then, but they had somehow accidentally neglected it while practicing their battle techniques. Thus, upon hearing what Principal Zhang said, they could only lower their heads silently in shame. It was no wonder Zhang Xian would get so enraged upon seeing them. He had imparted his knowledge unreservedly, and he had thought that after a few days of hard work, everyone would at least have been able to internalize 60% to 70% of what he had covered back then. However, from the looks of it, they didn't even manage to internalize 20%. For master teachers, wasn't their intelligence a little too poor? Of course, one thing that Zhang Xian had failed to realize was that his breakthroughs and modification of the Saint Ascension decipher in the subterranean gallery had enhanced his eye of discernment, deepening his understanding of combat. As a result, he was noticing more mistakes in the students' techniques than ever, and naturally, he thought that they hadn't made any improvements at all. This. Liao Song and Zhuo Qingfeng's breathing hastened. Those movements were overwhelmingly powerful and completely flawless in their eyes, and yet, the other party had been able to point out fatal flaws within them so easily. Wasn't his eye of discernment way too powerful? It was no wonder he was able to defeat a Saint Tu Dan combat master easily despite possessing only the cultivation of a nascent saint. Just his eye of discernment in itself was already far beyond what they could compare with. At this point, one of his subordinates, Zhou Yi, sent a telepathic message to him. Liao Shi, since there are so many flaws in their battle techniques and maneuvers, is it possible for us to exploit them to cleanse ourselves of our previous shame? For 100 men commander of the combat master hall to be defeated by an ordinary student of a master teacher academy so easily, it was natural that he would be frustrated and vexed. Over the days, this feeling only seemed to have deepened. Upon hearing that there were actually so many flaws in the moves of the Xianxian faction members, his eyes immediately lit up in excitement. It is, but I fear that it won't be as easy as you think to find their flaws. Liao Song shook his head. As easy as Principal Zhang made it seem, even a person with his eye of discernment couldn't see through the flaws in the maneuvers of those Xianxian faction members, so he didn't believe that his subordinate would be able to do so either. How could one exploit a flaw they didn't even know of? Then, what if we find the weakest of them to challenge? There are 30,000 of them, so it is impossible for all of them to be powerful. Zhou Yi exclaimed. This. Liao Song hesitated. The other party was right. Every person had varying levels of aptitude for combat. Even if they had all listened to the same lecture from Principal Zhang, what they were able to comprehend and learn would inevitably be different from one another. Just as there were incredibly powerful cultivators among the 30,000 members of the Xianxian faction, there were bound to be weak ones as well. Take the few students whom Principal Zhang had berated earlier, this clearly showed that there were still many of them who were lacking in one way or another. Enough. What we should be thinking of is not to exploit their weaknesses to defeat them, but to reflect on and improve ourselves through them. Just after Liao Song had lectured the others, Zhang Xian began the introduction. I believe I need not introduce Combat Master Liao, Combat Master Zhuo, and the others. I have invited them here today to offer you some pointers. Make sure to learn diligently later on and don't slack off. Yes. The crowd nodded. Combat Master Liao, these are the students I was talking about. I have only lectured them for an afternoon, so their fighting prowess isn't too impressive yet. Just do whatever you can, and it will be best if you can show them how powerful combat masters are so that they could have a goal to pursue. After introducing both sides to one another, Zhang Xian smiled. Ah! Liao Song was just about to speak when Ruohuan Gongzi abruptly walked over and greeted, Liao Shi, we meet once again. He was feeling a little embarrassed for pummeling the other party without knowing their identity. Yes, indeed. We meet again. Liao Song nodded in response. All right, I will leave you all to it. I still have some matters to attend to, so I will be taking my leave first. Zhang Xian waved his hands. Since there was still a month's time before the ancient domain opened, he was intending to use this period of time to pay a visit to Jingyuan City to find the poison hall and resolve Wei Ruyan's condition. But first, he would have to make sure that everything was in order so that he could leave in peace. Thus, he had brought these combat masters over in the hope of tempering the members of the Xianxian faction. If he could give them a glimpse of the strength of the combat masters, they could realize the gap between them and not embarrass them that badly when they went for the exchange later on. On the other hand, hearing that Zhang Xian was going to leave, Liao Song heaved a sigh of relief and clasped his fist. Farewell. It would be best if the other party wasn't around. Otherwise, it would be too embarrassing if their combat masters were to be defeated by the other party's students after all that was said. Zhang Xian turned around and flew toward his residence. In the blink of an eye, he had already disappeared from sight. Turning to the members of the Xianxian faction, Liao Song clasped his fist and smiled. Pleased to meet you all. While Principal Zhang has asked us to offer pointers to you, what he truly means is for the both of us to learn from one another. We can spar with one another so as to deepen our understanding of battle techniques. Ruohuan Gongzi nodded in agreement. It wouldn't do to just learn the theories of combat. Only by the accumulation of experience through practical combat would one be able to improve. Zhou Yi stepped forward. Leader, I would like to challenge an expert of the Xianxian faction. Brother Zhou. Ruohuan Gongzi recognized the other party, and he greeted him with a smile. I will help you find an opponent. While he had managed to defeat Zhou Yi back then, the other party's fighting prowess was still considerable. The members of the Xianxian faction looked formidable on the surface, but just as what Zhou Yi thought, there was a significant gap in the fighting prowess among them. Not every single one of them was a match for the combat masters. There is no need to go through that much trouble. Zhou Yi interrupted Ruohuan Gongzi and asked with a smile, is it possible for me to select my own opponent? If he wished to cleanse himself of his shame, he would have to select a weak opponent. Otherwise, if Ruohuan Gongzi were to pick an opponent for him, he would only be defeated once more. You wish to select an opponent yourself? Ruohuan Gongzi frowned. He could see through the other party's intention clearly, but after a moment of hesitation, he still nodded in agreement. Feel free. The purpose of this sparring session was to enhance their fighting prowess, not to vie for honor. Losing here was not a big deal. Thank you. Hearing the other party agree to his request, Zhou Yi heaved a sigh of relief. He began scanning the crowd to find an opponent. The Xianxian faction had more members than what one could see with a single glimpse. It wasn't very easy to determine the strength of an individual among the crowd from outside. A moment later, Zhou Ye's eyes lit up as he pointed toward a certain figure. I choose that person. You choose her. Turning to look at the person whom Zhou Yi had pointed at, Ruohuan Gongzi's lips twitched. Are you certain? I am. Zhou Yi nodded. He had met a few of the male students of the Xianxian faction, and he hadn't been a match for them. Thus, he decided to challenge a lady this time around. The lady he had chosen looked like she was in her early 20s, and she was extremely beautiful as well. At first sight, his heart was already moved. If he could defeat the other party and display tremendous strength in the process, perhaps he might be able to win the other party's favor and capture her heart. More importantly, the other party's cultivation was equal to his chrysalis realm. This way, he wouldn't have to suppress his cultivation, allowing him to exert the full extent of his might. If you are really certain, all right then. Seeing Zhou Yi insisting on it, Ruohuan Gongzi could only shake his head. He walked toward the young lady and explained the situation. The latter frowned for a moment before giving a nod of agreement and then walking to the nearby dueling ring. Leaping onto the dueling ring as well, Zhou Yi bowed gentlemanly and asked with a smile, I am Zhou Yi. May I know how to address you? I am. The young lady looked at Zhou Yi and spoke with a nonchalant voice. You Fei. The young lady whom Zhou Yi had chosen was none other than Yu Fei. She had been with Zhang Xian for 2 months while he was undergoing the empire-building test, cultivating diligently under the other party's guidance. To date, her cultivation had already reached chrysalis realm pinnacle, and her fighting prowess was even more fearsome. The reason she had gone to the Xianxian faction was to have a chat with Zhang Xian, but who knew that the latter would just turn around and leave? She was already frustrated by this matter, so when she heard that someone was foolish enough to actually challenge her to a duel, she agreed to it. Having been brought up in a doting environment, Yu Fei tended to allow her emotions to dictate her actions. No matter who he was, as long as the other party had provoked her, she would pummel him unhesitatingly. She wasn't an official member of the Xianxian faction, but given her close relationship with Zhang Xian, there was no one in the Xianxian faction who considered her an outsider. Yu Fei. What a beautiful name. Zhou Yi remarked with a fine smile. Let's begin. Yu Fei couldn't be bothered to waste her breath with the other party, so she raised her hand coldly and beckoned for the other party to begin. Sure, let's begin. Zhou Yi nodded excitedly. With a confident glint in his eyes, he said, since we are only sparring, I think there is no need to use weapons. It will be bad if we accidentally injure one another. Don't worry, I will try my best not to injure you. To be able to reach Chrysalis Realm at such a young age, the other party was indubitably a talented individual. However, he, Zhou Yi, was not an easy opponent either. So what if she was from the Xianxian faction as well? He might not be a match for Zheng Yang, Wei Ruyan, and the others, but he didn't believe that he would lose twice to opponents who had only sat through an afternoon lecture from Principal Zhang. Who? With such thoughts in mind, Zhou Yi stepped forcefully against the ground and began charging toward the young lady. Driving his Jinqi furiously to gather his full strength, a loud rumbling reminiscent of thunder boomed from his palm. Upon seeing that sight, Liao Song nodded in approval. 7-star thunder palm. Zhou Yi sure isn't going easy on the other party at all. Perhaps due to the loss he had suffered the previous time around, he didn't go easy on his opponent just because she was a lady. Instead, he was proceeding more carefully than ever. In the very first move, he had already executed his strongest attack. The 7-star thunder palm made use of 7 acupoints on one's palm in order to construct the 7-star formation to harness one's Jinqi with the might of thunder. It was a spirit pinnacle battle technique, and even half-saint cultivators would have to flee before this technique, needless to say, a delicate young lady like the other party. On the other hand, the unbelievably beautiful young lady remained completely motionless on the spot, seemingly scared out of her wits by the incredible momentum of Zhou Ye's attack. Frowning, Zhou Yi exclaimed in alarm, "Be careful." But before he could finish his words, the young lady before him suddenly flicked the delicate sleeves of her robe. What is she doing? Just as Zhou Yi was perplexed as to why the other party would abruptly flick her sleeves in the middle of the battle, his entire body suddenly jolted. An unbelievable force reminiscent of a devastating hurricane was rushing right toward him. Hoo-la! Before he could fully exert the might of the 7-star thunder palm, it was extinguished like a candle flame amid a storm. Following which, he felt a dull pain in his chest, and with a cry of agony, he was knocked out of the dueling ring. Putong! He collapsed on the ground. This! Liao Song and Zhuo Qingfeng glanced at one another, and their bodies stiffened in astonishment. How could that young lady possess such fearsome strength? They had once crossed hands with the members of the Xianxian faction on a previous occasion, and the opponents they had faced did possess combat sense far greater than theirs. But in terms of strength, their combat masters had still held the upper hand. Yet, the sheer might from a casual flick of the young lady's sleeves had actually sent Zhou Yi flying. Just how powerful was she? This was way too exaggerated. After knocking Zhou Yi out, Yu Fei turned to Liao Song and the others and said, "Suppress your cultivation down to my level and come at me all at once." She was already unhappy at having been deprived the opportunity of speaking to Zhang Xian, and these fellows had actually provoked her at such a sensitive moment. They were simply courting death. Who of Hengyuan Empire didn't know that she, Yu Fei, had an explosive temper? She was never one to hold herself back. A bunch of puny combat masters actually dared to provoke her while she was in a bad mood. If she didn't knock the teeth out of their mouths, her surname wouldn't be Yu. What an arrogant woman. Allow me to teach her a lesson. Hearing Yu Fei's words, a Chrysalis Realm combat master couldn't stand it any longer and leaped onto the dueling ring. However, before he could even land on the ground, a figure abruptly materialized before his eyes, and in the next instant, a palm struck his chest. Pang! Before he could even get onto the dueling ring, he had already been pounded into the ground, coughing huge spurts of blood. She had been listening to Zhang Xian's lessons every single day in the 2 months she had accompanied him. The result of that was a tremendous surge in her cultivation, as well as a frightening growth in her fighting prowess. Damn you! Seeing how their companion had been knocked down before he could even get on the dueling ring, the other combat masters were enraged. Roaring furiously, they suppressed their cultivation to Chrysalis Realm Pinnacle and charged forward. Why don't you try speaking with your fists instead of your mouth? Paying no heed to the furious roaring of the combat masters, Yu Feier leaped forward and dashed into the midst of the combat masters. Pai Pala. 10 minutes later, other than Liao Song and Zhuo Qingfeng, the remaining combat masters were lying on the ground with looks of despair in their eyes. Many of them possessed strength beyond Chrysalis Realm, but with their cultivation suppressed to Chrysalis Realm Pinnacle, they found themselves being severely outmatched by the young lady. In fact, they couldn't even withstand a single blow from the other party. The young lady was indeed beautiful, but she felt like a rampaging dinosaur shaped in the form of a human. The overwhelming strength that she wielded was far beyond their means. Staring at his fallen subordinates, Liao Song clenched his fists tightly. You aren't an ordinary member of the Xianxian faction, are you? He had met the ordinary members of the Xianxian faction, and while they weren't weak either, they were nowhere as fearsome as the rampaging young lady before his eyes. Even compared to Zhen Yang and the others, she didn't pale far in comparison. There was no way a single lecture or two from Principal Zhang could make her that powerful. With such thoughts in mind, Liao Song asked, if I am not mistaken, you are Principal Zhang's student, aren't you? Otherwise, there is no way you can be that powerful. You are the one who is Principal Zhang's student, your entire family is Principal Zhang's students. Triggered, Yu Feier bellowed furiously as she charged straight toward Liao Song. At this moment, the words that she dreaded to hear the most were that she was Zhang Xian's student. If such a relationship between the both of them were to be affirmed, she would have to sever all of those thoughts of hers. Yet, that fellow just had to pick right at her wounds. Unforgivable. You. Not expecting the other party to fly into such a rage at a casual question from him, Liao Song nearly keeled over. He hurriedly dodged the attack and began suppressing his cultivation down to the other party's level. Shortly after he did so, he saw the young lady's palm raining down on him frenziedly. Liao Shi. Upon seeing this sight, Zhuo Qingfeng couldn't help but turn his gaze away. No doubt about it, his old friend was in for a round of suffering. And as expected, 5 minutes later, Liao Song's entire body was swollen red, and his face was ghastly pale. Even after suppressing his cultivation to Chrysalis Realm, his fighting prowess was still on par with that young lady's. But, it was as if that young lady had completely lost her rationality. Without any care or concern, she threw out blow after blow in quick succession. Even with his strength, it didn't take long for him to succumb. It was fortunate that he had managed to protect his face right to the very end. Otherwise, he would have no face to face the others for many days to come. Humph. After venting her frustration, Yu Feier tilted her face upwards and harumphed before turning around to leave. Right after she left, Hu Yaoyao walked into the headquarters with an expectant look. Is Principal Zhang around? Principal Zhang isn't around, but the members of the Combat Master Hall are. Does Senior Hu want to try fighting them? Ruohuan Gongzi replied respectfully. There are combat masters here. Sure. A ravishing smile blossomed on Hu Yaoyao's lips. With the combat masters tempering the fighting capabilities of the members of the Xianxian faction, Zhang Xian could finally put his mind to ease. He returned to the manor to take a look at Wei Ruyan. After confirming that he had managed to suppress the poison aura within her body for the time being, he heaved a sigh of relief. After which, he had Sun Chang gather Wang Ying and the others. Teacher. Wang Ying and the others greeted upon seeing Zhang Xian. I am going to take Wei Ruyan to Jingyuan City to uncover the whereabouts of the poison hall. Here are several manuals containing the cultivation techniques and comprehension of battle techniques I have compiled. Read through them quickly and voice whatever doubts you have regarding them now. Flicking his wrist, Zhang Xian took out a few books and passed them over. On the way back from the academy, he had quickly penned down his newfound comprehension of the Saint Ascension decipher and several new insights regarding battle techniques. He had no idea how long he would be gone for, so he decided to leave these items for them so that his departure wouldn't impede their cultivation. Yes. Wang Ying and the others nodded before hurriedly taking the books. The knowledge contained in the books was very profound, but having learned the Saint Ascension decipher, it didn't take too long for them to comprehend it. Within less than 6 hours, they had already gained a deep understanding of the material. Zhang Xian also explained the parts that they were uncertain about in detail. By the time they were done, it was already late at night. All right. Wang Ying and Lu Yang, you will be challenging the Dragon Gate formation tomorrow, so make sure to internalize what I have taught you today, Zhang Xian instructed. One of the reasons he was in such a rush to teach them was to prepare Wang Ying and Lu Yang for the Dragon Gate formation. He had never seen it before, but after hearing Zheng Yang's account on clearing the trial, he could tell that it wouldn't be easy. Wang Ying and Lu Yang had become his students rather early on, and they were diligent in their studies as well, but with their current strength, it would be difficult for them to clear such a difficult trial within 2 hours without resorting to special means like Zheng Yang. However, if they could further their cultivation of the Saint Ascension decipher and deepen their comprehension of combat, they could stand a pretty good chance. Yes. Wang Ying and Lu Yang nodded before turning their attention back to internalizing the knowledge they had just learnt. Some time later, they finally managed to fully digest the new knowledge that their teacher had imparted to them, and their fighting prowess rose significantly. Getting to their feet, Wang Ying and Lu Yang turned to their teacher and declared confidently, "Teacher, we will surely clear the Dragon Gate formation." They hadn't been too confident about clearing the trial previously, but after digesting everything their teacher had just taught, they felt that they were ready to face it. Furthermore, they had also shared the battle techniques they had just learned with one another, thus granting them more cards to play against the combat masters. In their current state, they were confident of victory. Good. Zhang Xian nodded in approval. Taking a look out of the window, he saw that the sun had already risen. It was daybreak. All right, let's head to the academy now. Together with his 2 students, Zhang Xian headed to the Master Teacher Academy, but barely after stepping through the entrance, school head Imo suddenly rushed up to him with an anxious look on his face. "Principal Zhang. I just went to the combat master's accommodation and, they are all gone. They have left without bidding farewell, leaving just a letter behind." "They have left?" Zhang Xian was taken aback. Weren't they going to assess Wang Ying and Lu Yang? Why would they suddenly leave overnight without bidding farewell? Perplexed, Zhang Xian took the letter from school head Mo's hands and quickly scanned it. Chapter 978, Jingyuan City. There were only 2 lines of words on it, and the message was simple. It said that they still had something to do at the Combat Master Hall, so they had to take their leave in advance. They would meet them later on when the ancient domain opened. As for the reason for their departure, they hadn't said a word about that. After reading the message, Zhang Xian was perplexed. Weren't they still doing fine yesterday, agreeing to a sparring session with the Xianxian faction and saying that they would work together to improve collectively? Why would they suddenly leave in the blink of an eye? Why were the elders and master teachers whom he came into contact with always so unreliable? Despite having lived in the Hongyuan Master Teacher Academy for some time, they actually left without bidding farewell at all, as if there was some kind of monster chasing them behind their backs. This was really far too disrespectful of them. How did such a lawful and courteous person like him end up being surrounded by such a bunch of undependable acquaintances? Ah, how distressing. Did anything happen in the Combat Master Hall? Shaking his head, Zhang Xian turned to school head Imo and asked. That doesn't seem likely. I asked them about it through our shared mode of communication, and they said that they just had some private matters to attend to. As for what the private matter was, they weren't willing to speak of it no matter how I asked them about it. Oh, right. Principal Zhang, when I returned yesterday night, I noticed that all of them were injured. Could it be related to that? School head Imo pondered for a moment before replying. Earlier, while returning to his residence after finally having finished the matters at hand, he had happened to see Combat Master Liao and the others returning to their accommodations with bruised faces and swollen cheeks. In order to avoid potential awkwardness, he had chosen not to ask about it. But thinking about it now, there was a very high chance that the two matters were related. Injured? Zhang Xian scratched his head in bewilderment. Hadn't they gone to offer pointers to the members of the Xianxian faction? How did they end up getting injured instead? Forget it, there's no point thinking too much about the matter. We will know the truth when we ask them a month later. Since the combat masters had already left, there was no point thinking about it. Besides, he didn't have the time and effort to deal with it either. After asking a few more questions and discussing the academy's administrative issues with school head Mo, he returned back to the manor and reminded Wang Ying and the others to work hard on their cultivation. When all this was finally done, he carefully placed Wei Ruyan into the myriad anthive nest, got onto the back of the Byzantium Helios beast, and began heading for Jingyuan City. The journey in search of the poison hall was going to be incomparably dangerous, so he chose not to bring his other direct disciples along, and he didn't intend to tell anyone else about his whereabouts either. In any case, it would be much more convenient for him to move alone than in a group too. Jingyuan City was located at the extreme northeast of Hengyuan Empire, located in proximity to Hengyuan Empire's largest inland sea. As compared to Hengyuan City and Firesource City, it was relatively poorer and shabbier due to its remote location and cold climate all year round. As merchants rarely visited Jingyuan City, there weren't too many people who knew of the situation there. The information that the Master Teacher Academy had on it was also rather lacking. All that was known about it was that it was a small borderside city with frigid weather all year round. Considering the poison hall's nature of building its branches in remote locations, there was indeed a good chance that the Hengyuan Empire Poison Hall was located here. Of course, it was still too early to say for sure. While the old principal had put a lot of work into acquiring that intelligence, there was no guarantee that it would be definitely true. This was why Zhang Xian had chosen to make haste. A month might have seemed like a long time, but given the secrecy shrouding the poison hall, it might not necessarily be sufficient. My fame has grown considerably after becoming the principal of the Hengyuan Master Teacher Academy. If I were to suddenly appear in Jingyuan City in my own identity, I could risk alarming the poison hall. Seated on the back of the Byzantium Helios beast as he advanced towards the small city marked on the map, Zhang Xian lowered his head contemplatively. He was no longer the nobody he was back then. He was currently the esteemed principal of one of the 4 great master-teacher academies of Qingyuan conferred empire, and his standing was on par with a 7-star master teacher. The Poison Hall had always been in a tense relationship with the master-teacher pavilion. If he were to recklessly barge into Jingyuan City and investigate the whereabouts of the Poison Hall, he could very well face grave danger when his identity was exposed. Thus, there was a need for him to don a disguise. After pondering for a moment, Zhang Xian began to warp his muscles and bones. His facial features began to change from those of a 20-year-old young man to a 40-year-old middle-aged man's, and his physique also grew much bigger than before. At the same time, driving his heaven's path Shinchi, the aura shrouding him also began to change. It became a little violent and ferocious, unlike the restrained and low-profile disposition he usually commanded. In his current state, if he didn't explicitly state that he was Zhang Xian, not even Wang Ying or his other direct disciples would be able to recognize him. The Heaven's Path Shinchi allowed him to conceal his aura, and the Heaven's Path Golden Body allowed him to alter his appearance freely. Considering that he was able to pass off as even an otherworldly demon with those two means, how difficult could it be for him to disguise as another human? The Byzantium Helios beast flew ahead at full speed, and 10 days later, a city covered in snow appeared over the horizon. Looking at it from afar, it was significantly smaller than Hongyuan City. Nonetheless, as compared to Huanyu City and the Myriad Kingdom City, it was still of a sizable scale. Many dull gray buildings were erected amidst a field of clear white snow, and they stretched all the way into the faraway distance. From above, the city resembled a tranquil ink painting. It is already nearing the middle of summer, but this land is still covered in snow. Zhang Xian couldn't help but be awed by the work of nature. It was now the season when Hongyuan Empire would normally be covered by a lush layer of greenery. Yet, the city before him was freezing cold, leaving him feeling as if he had stepped into a different world. You should get into the ant-hive nest first. Landing in a remote forest, Zhang Xian had the Byzantium Helios beast enter the myriad ant-hive nest before making his way through the field of snow towards the city. The Byzantium Helios beast rarely appeared in public view, but it was still best for him to remain hidden just to be safe. After paying the entrance fee of 10 low-tier spirit stones, Zhang Xian entered the city. Walking through the streets, Zhang Xian thought, it won't do for me to search blindly through the city. I must find a guide to bring me around. The clues he had received thus far had pointed to Jingyuan City to be the most likely location where the poison hall was located, but there was no way he would be able to find its exact whereabouts easily. Back then, to enter the Red Lotus Ridge Poison Hall, he had to depend on the local Great Herb King to lead the way. Otherwise, there was a good chance he wouldn't have been able to find it even if he were to spend his entire life searching for it. This was also the main reason why the Poison Hall was able to preserve its lineage for so long despite its betrayal back then. After taking a look around the city, Zhang Xian suddenly noticed a bustling tavern not too far away. Severing Sorrows Pavilion, severing one's sorrows through joy and wine, a fine name indeed. Chuckling softly, he made his way towards it. A tavern was usually the place of gathering for those from all walks of life, making it an ideal location to scout out intelligence. Besides, after flying for more than 10 days, Zhang Xian's mouth was already craving a bite of good food. It would be a good opportunity for him to let loose for a bit and try out the local delicacies. Guest, this way please. An attendant welcomed Zhang Xian with a fawning smile. Zhang Xian nodded as he casually tossed a middle-tier spirit stone over. Give me the quietest seat inside. Sure thing. The attendant's eyes lit up as he hurriedly led the way. I will bring you to your seat. A middle-tier spirit stone was no longer of much value to Zhang Xian, but to weaker cultivators or ordinary citizens at the lower end of the social stratum, it was a huge fortune. After settling down in his seat, Zhang Xian casually ordered several of the local specialties before gesturing for the attendant to come closer. This is my first time in Jingyuan City. If I need to gather some information, who would be the best person for me go to? There was no way a humble attendant of a tavern could possibly have any substantial news about the Poison Hall, so Zhang Xian couldn't be bothered to ask directly about it. Thus, he decided to ask for a reliable news source instead. The sale of information was always a lucrative trade regardless of location. It wasn't rare for cultivators to offer astronomical prices in exchange for vital information, so information brokers could always be found in most cities. If you wish to gather information, the best place to go is, without doubt, the Ink Cloud Quarter. They command the most extensive intelligence network in Jingyuan City, and the information they provide is also the most accurate of all. The attendant said with a hushed voice. Ink Cloud Quarter. It's the biggest marketplace of our Jingyuan City. Not only do they sell artifacts, pills, and other common commodities, but they also deal in information as well. Even intelligence on the Hongyuan royal family isn't beyond reach there. Just a while ago, someone had specially purchased intelligence on Princess Yufei, planning to head to the capital to propose to her. Due to the generous tip Zhang Xian had offered him earlier, the attendant was extremely friendly. Propose? Hearing those words, Zhang Xian shook his head. Given Yu Feier's explosive temper, anyone who dared to propose to her would probably be pummeled to death on the spot. However, the fact that the Ink Cloud Quarter had intelligence on Princess Yu Feier despite their long distance from the capital was a testimony to the capability of the Ink Cloud Quarter. Zhang Xian proceeded to ask about its location, and after learning that it wasn't too far away, he dismissed the attendant. Despite how remote Jingyuan City was, the food was excellent, and Zhang Xian devoured it delightfully. After he finished, he got up and left for Ink Cloud Quarter. Ink Cloud Quarter was a massive market dealing in almost everything that one could think of it, be it paintings, ores, formation plates, or anything of the sort. There were several guards standing imposingly at the entrance, each of them exuding a powerful aura that deterred any potential troublemakers. They were all transcendent mortal 7-Dan perfect harmonization realm experts. Such strength would definitely place them amongst the ranks of the top experts of Huanyu Empire, and yet, they were serving as mere guards here. It seemed like there was indeed something extraordinary about Ink Cloud Quarter. Walking in, Zhang Xian found himself surrounded by vendors and huge crowds walking to and fro. It was extremely lively. Intelligence regarding the poison hall was definitely classified, so it was impossible for the ordinary vendors around him to be selling such vital information. Thus, Zhang Xian walked straight up to the front desk, and with a cold face, he commanded, "Get your manager here. I have something to ask him." As he said those words, he lifted his forefinger. A surge of incomparably sharp sword chi that sent shivers down one's spine flickered on the tip of his finger, revealing his nascent Saint Pinnacle cultivation. Why yes. Seeing that the man before him was far beyond his means to deal with, the front desk receptionist hurriedly got up and left. Not too long later, he returned with a middle-aged man. "Esteemed guest, I am the manager of Ink Cloud Quarter, Zhu Shao. May I know what request you have of us?" The middle-aged man was a half-saint cultivator. While he was surprised by Zhang Xian's powerful aura, he was still able to retain his composure as he maintained an attitude that was neither humble nor arrogant before him. "Arrange a quiet chamber for me. I have something important to talk about." Zhang Xian glanced at Zhu Shao nonchalantly and said, "This way, please." Without any hesitation, Zhu Shao stepped forward and led the way. They quickly arrived at a private room. Zhang Xian took a look around the area before nodding in approval. He really had to say that he was impressed by the extent to which the Ink Cloud Quarter had gone in order to maintain the confidentiality of their dealings. There were all kinds of formations set up around the room, such that even if a battle were to occur within, those outside still wouldn't notice a thing. Its security was indubitably top-notch. "Are you satisfied with this room?" Zhu Shao asked with a smile. "Not too bad." Zhang Xian nodded. After which, he turned a sharp gaze towards Zhu Shao and spoke, "I want intelligence on the poison hall. Offer a price." "Poison hall?" Zhu Shao frowned. He shook his head and said, "I'm afraid that I will have to disappoint you. We don't have any news on the poison hall here, so I will have to ask you to ask something else." "You don't have any news on the poison hall?" At this point, Zhang Xian abruptly burst into a hearty laughter. Flicking his wrist, he took out a pile consisting of more than 100 high-tier spirit stones and asked, "Is this enough?" Upon seeing the huge pile of high-tier spirit stones, Zhu Zhao's eyebrows visibly shot up in astonishment despite his attempt to retain his composure. Eventually, he clenched his jaws and replied, "My apologies, but this isn't a problem of money. Our Ink Cloud Quarter truly doesn't have any news on the poison hall." Paying no heed to the other party's words, Zhang Xian flicked his wrist and took out another gleaming pile of 500 high-tier spirit stones. In an instant, the spiritual energy in the air grew considerably more concentrated. "Is this enough?" "This." Zhu Zhao's face paled. "This matter is already beyond my jurisdiction. I have to report it to my boss." Chapter 979, poisoning he was only the manager of the Incloud Quarter. A trade which involved a humongous sum of several hundred high-tier spirit stones. There was no way he was qualified to make a judgment on this matter. Go ahead. Zhang Xian waved his hand. If it was that easy to uncover news on the poison hall, there was no way the old principal would have been unable to find it back then. Knowing that it would be a difficult fight, Zhang Xian decided to throw out huge amounts of money out right from the start so as to force the other party to negotiate with him. Even if the other party really didn't have any concrete news on the poison hall, the Incloud Quarter, given its long establishment in Jingyuan City, should still have some clues regarding the matter. Had it been someone else, there would be no way they could tell whether the clues were true or not, thus making it potentially a futile attempt. However, it was different for Zhang Xian. He could easily ascertain the authenticity of those clues and dig out the whereabouts of the poison hall with certainty, even if it was located beneath the ground. Yes. Zhu Xiao quickly rushed out of the room, headed for a vast room that stood at the heart of the Incloud Quarter. Boss. Stepping into the vast room, Zhu Xiao immediately clasped his fist and greeted the middle-aged man before him. The boss of Incloud Quarter, Hu Yunsheng. A Saint One Dan Pinnacle expert. What's wrong? Hu Yunsheng was in the midst of flipping through some documents when Zhu Xiao abruptly entered. Lifting his gaze, he asked calmly. Boss, I just met with a guest earlier, and the other party requested to purchase information regarding the poison hall. Zhu Xiao reported. Information regarding the poison hall? Hu Yunsheng frowned. Just do the usual. Tell him that we have no such news and drive him away. I told him that we don't have any news on the poison hall, but the other party immediately took out more than 500 high-tier spirit stones and insisted on purchasing it. As such, I came over here to report the matter to you. Zhu Xiao swiftly went through the details of the matter. 500 high-tier spirit stones. Hu Yunsheng narrowed his eyes in astonishment. The fact that even the esteemed school heads of the Hongyuan Master Teacher Academy, be it school head Mo or school head Zhao, could only afford to take out a few dozen high-tier spirit stones at any point in time went to show just how huge a fortune it actually was. 500 high-tier spirit stones. Even the annual profits of the entire Incloud Quarter didn't amount to that. That's right. Zhu Xiao nodded. What kind of person is he? Hu Yunsheng asked with a deep frown. Pondering for a moment, Zhu Xiao replied, he seems to be in his 40s. He is slightly stronger than me, possessing a cultivation of nascent Saint Pinnacle. As for his background, I am not too sure about that either. A nascent Saint Pinnacle cultivator was actually able to take out 500 spirit stones at once? Hu Yunsheng could hardly believe what he was hearing. Even he didn't have 500 high-tier spirit stones in his possession at the moment, so how could a nascent Saint Pinnacle cultivator possess such wealth? Could it be that the other party had originated from some powerful organization or affluent clan? Bring me over to take a look. Hu Yunsheng stood up and said. Yes, but boss, we really don't have much news regarding the poison hall at hand. If you were to insist on it, what should we do? Zhu Xiao asked. Even within Jingyuan City, the poison hall was an existence shrouded in secrecy. As extensive as the intelligence network of Incloud Quarter was, they were still unable to uncover anything much about the poison hall, let more its whereabouts. I will decide depending on the circumstances later on. If he has a powerful backing, I can consider handing over the information we have gathered on the poison hall thus far. However, if he is just an ordinary nouveau riche one, there is no way our Incloud Quarter is going to let a fat lamb who has wandered into our midst escape. A cold glint flashed across Hu Yunsheng's eyes. Incloud Quarter wasn't just an ordinary business, it was the dominating power of Jingyuan City's underworld as well. If the other party had a powerful backing behind him, he might still have to think twice before acting. Otherwise, for an ordinary nascent saint cultivator to hold so much wealth in his possession, he would really be letting himself down if he were to allow this juicy piece of meat to flee from his mouth. But if he has so many high-tier spirit stones on him, even if he was a nouveau riche, he would have surely recruited experts to protect him. Zhu Xiao was still worried. Only with power would one be able to protect one's own wealth. This was common sense to all cultivators. For the other party to publicly flaunt his wealth without the slightest hint of fear, even if he didn't have any powerful clan or organization backing him, it was almost certain that he must have prepared a hand in case such a situation arose. In other words, if they were to lay their hands on the other party, it could possibly bring trouble upon in Cloud Quarter. Wasn't he looking into news concerning the poison hall? Surely it shouldn't be too surprising for him to be killed by the poison hall, right? As long as we were to conceal it well, we will be able to get away with it easily. Hu Yunqing sneered coldly. This. Zhu Xiao hesitated for a moment before nodding. That was indeed true. The poison hall was intent on concealing its whereabouts, so anyone who was seeking them could very well pose a threat to them as long as they were to carry it out well. There would be no one who would suspect in Cloud Quarter to be the culprit. Alright, prepare the gourd of fine wine in our storage for our guest. Later on, pay careful attention and act on my command. Hu Yunqing waved his hand and said. Yes. Zhu Xiao nodded before quickly rushing off. He returned a moment later, and the both of them made their way for the chamber which Zhang Xian was currently seated at. I heard that you are intending to purchase information regarding the poison hall. Upon arriving in the room, Hu Yunqing took a seat and began assessing the middle-aged man before his eyes carefully. The other party commanded a powerful aura. He was indeed a nascent Saint Pinnacle cultivator. However, his appearance was unfamiliar, probably not a local to Jinyuan City. There were only that many nascent saint cultivators in Jinyuan City and the surrounding cities. In Cloud Quarter had a detailed profile on every single nascent saint expert in the vicinity, and there was none that matched the characteristics of the middle-aged man before him. That's right. Zhang Xian replied impassively. Hu Yunqing lowered his head contemplatively for a moment before raising his gaze to say, the poison hall is not only shrouded in secrecy, they are also known for being vindictive. If they were to find out that we have leaked their news, we might very well suffer their vengeance. May I know how I can address you, and what your motive for seeking the poison hall is? Pardon me for being a little wary over here, but we will have to take that into consideration before coming to a decision. I am Sun Chang. Zhang Xian replied. As the principal of the Hengyuan Master Teacher Academy, his real name was extremely well known throughout Hengyuan Empire, so it would be unsafe for him to use it even when disguised. On the other hand, his butler, Sun Chang, wasn't too well known in comparison. Even if the other party was aware of Sun Chang's existence, the other party would just think that it was a coincidence. Sun Chang. Are you from Qingyuan City's Sun Clan? Hu Yunqing pondered for a moment before asking. That's not it. Zhang Xian shook his head. Then the descendant of the leader of Lofty Tiger Sect? Hu Yunqing continued. Zhang Xian shook his head once more. Then. Hu Yunqing consecutively asked about more than a dozen famous individuals and clans in Hengyuan Empire going by the surname of Sun, but Zhang Xian shook his head at all of them. Ask no more. I am just a normal, wandering cultivator. I have no particular background that is worthy of note. The reason why I am looking into the poison hall is due to some private matters that I have to settle. Don't worry, I won't implicate anyone in this matter, and I won't tell anyone that I have obtained my information from your in Cloud Quarter. Seeing that the other party was determined to dig up his background, Zhang Xian waved his hand impatiently and said. A normal, wandering cultivator. Hu Yunqing chuckled softly. I see. Since Brother Sun has already said so, I won't waste your time any further. I have a few pieces of information regarding the poison hall, but they aren't too detailed. Zhu Xiao, bring them over for Brother Sun. Yes. Zhu Xiao nodded and got to his feet. Before he could walk out of the room, Hu Yunqing suddenly issued another instruction. Before you gather the documents, bring some fine wine and delicacies here first. After which, Hu Yunqing turned to Zhang Xian and said, brother Sun, it will take some time to compile the information, so I will have to ask you to be patient. Meanwhile, allow me to interest you in some food and drink. Not too long later, Zhu Xiao returned with a few plates of side dishes and a gourd of wine before leaving once more. Brother Sun, please. Chuckling softly, Hu Yunsheng poured a cup of wine and handed it over to Zhang Xian. Zhang Xian took the cup of wine and asked with an earnest smile, "May I know how I should address you?" "Ah, how could I have forgotten to introduce myself? My surname is Hu." Hu Yunsheng said. "Hu? I happen to have a friend who goes by the surname of Hu as well, and she is as wily as a fox, making her a really difficult person to deal with. How good it will be if she could be as honest as brother Hu." Zhang Xian spoke meaningfully. "Ha ha ha, the foundation of business lies in trust. How can I possibly run a business without being honest?" Without the slightest bit of embarrassment, Hu Yunsheng said. "Well said. If only there are more honest merchants like you out there in the world will be a better place. Cheers." Zhang Xian lifted his cup and gulped the wine down. "Cheers." Hu Yunsheng chuckled softly as he brought the wine cup to his lips before placing it down once more. Seeing that Hu Yunsheng had only taken a sip, Zhang Xian's eyebrows shot up. "Brother Hu, aren't you looking down on me too?" "Of course not. I just have a lot of things to attend to, and alcohol doesn't go well with me." "So?" Hu Yunsheng's lips twitched for an instant before he hurriedly explained. "What do you mean by alcohol doesn't go well with you? As a businessman, you should be more decisive when you drink. Come, let me help you." Grabbing Hu Yunsheng's shoulder with his right hand and the wine cup with his left, Zhang Xian chuckled as he lifted the cup up to the other party's mouth. Seeing that Zhang Xian was actually going to force-feed him, Hu Yunsheng's face darkened in displeasure. "There is no need to trouble brother Sun for this. I can do it myself. It is no trouble at all. We are brothers, there is no need to stand on ceremony." Zhang Xian said as his lips curled up into a bright smile. Seeing that the other party was intent on forcing that cup of wine into his mouth, Hu Yunsheng immediately drove his Jinqi to struggle himself free from the other party's grip and knock the wine cup away. To his horror, he realized that he was unable to move at all, as if someone had bound him tightly. The other party's Jinqi felt like unbreakable shackles on his body, rendering him completely immobile. "This." Hu Yunsheng's eyes narrowed in alarm as cold sweat trickled down his back. He had let his guard down, thinking that the other party was just a nascent saint cultivator. But upon feeling the astounding strength the other party was exerting, he immediately realized how could a fellow possessing such strength possibly be a nascent saint. Even with his Saint 1 Dan pinnacle cultivation, he would only be utterly crushed in a fight. The other party had been feigning weakness all along to lure him in. Just where in the world did this fellow come from? To make things worse, the other party seemed to have noticed that something was wrong with his wine and was force-feeding it to him. "Come, drink. There is no need to get courteous with me here." In the midst of his shock, the wine cup was already right before his mouth. Without any time to react, the wine was already poured down his throat. Cough, cough, cough. Choked by the wine, Hu Yunsheng coughed so violently that tears began streaming down his face. It took a while before he could recover from it, but in the next moment, he saw the other party grabbing the entire wine gourd, and before he could say a word, the other party stuffed it into his mouth. Gudong, gudong, gudong. Wine flowed relentlessly down his throat, nearly taking his final breath away with it. That was wine laced with lethal poison. Even if he had the antidote, his body would still suffer tremendous damage from drinking so much at once. Who could have known that in his attempt to hunt down a prey, he would be done in by his prey instead? Gugugugu. In just a few moments, with his mouth pried open by the other party's fingers, the entire gourd of wine gushed into his body. After forcing the wine down his throat, the other party finally released his grip and looked at him with a radiant smile. "How was the wine?" "Good. You?" Hu Yunxing pointed a finger at Zhang Xian with a face reddened with rage when a bout of sharp pain suddenly struck him. He hurriedly took out a pill and popped it into his mouth. After which, he glared at the middle-aged man with killing intent flaring from his eyes. Who in the world are you? I am Sun Chong. Didn't I tell you that earlier? Zhang Xian chuckled softly. At which, he suddenly patted his face, and as if having just recalled something, he said, "Oh, I nearly forgot. I just added some extra ingredients to your wine, so it might be a little more potent than usual. You said that you don't do well with alcohol, so I hope that it isn't too strong for you." Right after saying those words, Hu Yunxing's face paled and his entire body stiffened. Erg, a mouthful of blood spurted from his mouth. You poisoned me? Hu Yunxing's eyes narrowed in horror. You are a poison master. Chapter 980, Sepulchre Flower. He had been keeping a close watch over the other party's actions while the poisoned wine was forced down his throat. From the very beginning, the other party had never touched the wine at all, coming into contact with the cup and gourd only. Considering the discreet poisoning method, there was no doubt that the other party was a poison master. More importantly, the poison was so potent that even a Saint One Dan pinnacle expert like him was rendered powerless. Without a doubt, the other party must be a 6-star poison master at the very minimum. For a poison master of your caliber to not even know the location of the poison hall, were you intentionally doing this to teach me a lesson? It was laughable that he even tried to use poison against the other party in the end. He ended up getting a taste of his own medicine. Why would I bother looking for the whereabouts of the poison hall if I wasn't a poison master? Sneering coldly, Zhang Xian snapped his fingers and commanded, "Come, puke a mouthful out for me." Zhang Xian had known from the very start that the other party had poisoned the wine. Through driving his Heaven's Path Xinqi, he was able to neutralize it easily. After which, he secretly infused 2 surges of Heaven's Path Xinqi into the wine, thus lacing it with lethal poison. Due to the incredible purity of the Heaven's Path Xinqi, it was capable of infiltrating any single acupoint and organ of a human body, making it nigh impossible to guard against it. Even with a cultivation of Saint One Dan pinnacle, the other party was still completely powerless against it. Right after Zhang Xian said those words, his Xinqi rampaged within Hu Yunxing's body and induced a scream of agony from him, followed by a spurt of fresh blood. I will kill you. With a pale face, Hu Yunxing forcefully drove his Xinqi and charged at Zhang Xian. As the boss of Ink Cloud Quarter, he was an existence that even the city lord of Jingyuan City had to defer to. Yet, for him to actually be poisoned by a nascent saint, the immense fury coursing through his veins turned his face was red as lava. He leaped forward vehemently and crushed his palm down upon Zhang Xian. You sure aren't obedient at all. Come down. Sitting idly in his seat, Zhang Xian lifted his eyelid to glance at Hu Yunxing idly before snapping his fingers once more. Pa! Before the palm could even strike, Hu Yunxing's entire body jolted as if he had been electrified. He crashed back down onto the ground, his body splayed out as if a toad. This poison is sentient? Hu Yunxing gasped in disbelief. His body trembled uncontrollably upon the realization, and his face suddenly became ghastly pale. Poisons could be classified into 2 categories, non-sentient and sentient. Non-sentient poison was dangerous, but more often than not, they could be resolved by finding the correct antidote. On the other hand, sentient poison was capable of averting danger or even obeying commands. It might not be possible for one to resolve the poison even with the antidote in hand. However, concocting a sentient poison was an extremely complicated process. Just like goo, it had to be reared. Even at the bare minimum, one had to be an 8-star master teacher to be able to concoct it. Could it be that the middle-aged man before him was such a poison master? Goo is basically a poisonous insect which can be planted into another's body to create certain effects, such as forcing a person to love another, put one under great suffering, control the other's mind, etc. It is more commonly associated to certain ethnic tribes in ancient China, and can be considered as a combination of black magic and poison. But to become an 8-star master teacher, one had to possess a cultivation of Saint 6 Dan at the very minimum. Every single person who had reached that level was a famed expert of the master teacher continent, so why would such a person possibly come to such a remote little city in search of the local poison hall? In that instant, Hu Yunqing's heart trembled in trepidation as fear swiftly overwhelmed him. He. Zhang Xian chuckled softly, not bothering to explain at all. He could control his heaven's path Jinqi with his will remotely. As such, even though his Jinqi wasn't sentient, he could easily produce effects similar to one. But of course, this only applied at close distances. If he was too far away from the target, Zhang Xian's psyche would be unable to reach his heaven's path Jinqi, thus making it impossible for him to control it anymore. A true sentient poison would be like his innate fetal poison. It would be impossible to struggle free of it no matter where one went, rendering the afflicted completely helpless before it. Realizing that there was no way he could stand up against the other party, Hu Yunqing's face reddened and paled intermittently, and after a long while, he gritted his teeth tightly and uttered, "I admit defeat." What else could he possibly do in this situation? He couldn't defeat the other party, and the poison he had sustained further worsened his position. At this point, his life and death hinged on the other party's whim. He thought that he had truly struck gold this time round, but in the end, it turned out to just be a bait to lure him in. Just the thought of it left him incredibly stifled within. This is more like it. Receiving Hu Yunqing's surrender, Zhang Xian smiled in satisfaction. "I want to know everything you have on the poison hall." Hu Yunqing gritted his teeth and replied, "Honestly speaking, despite the extensive connections that our Inkcloud quarter has, it doesn't know much about the poison hall. They are an extremely careful bunch. You just have to tell me whether the poison hall is located in the vicinity of Jingyuan City." Zhang Xian said. "Yes." Hu Yunqing nodded. In the past few years, there have been quite a few people seeking the whereabouts of the poison hall as well, so I have been keeping a lookout myself too. Based on the information I have received so far, I am certain that it is in the Viridian Cloud Sea. However, I still don't have enough information to pinpoint the specific location. Furthermore, according to what I have heard, it seems like it is impossible to enter the poison hall without a special token, even if one were to find the real location. Viridian Cloud Sea. Zhang Xian frowned. The Viridian Cloud Sea was the largest inland sea of Hengyuan Empire, spanning a distance of around several 100,000 kilometers from one end to another. Vast and boundless, there were countless ferocious spirit beasts and saint beasts in its midst. Even a Saint 5 Dan expert would hesitate to enter it. If the poison hall was in the midst of the Viridian Cloud Sea and was concealed by a formation, it was nigh impossible for one to find it without knowing the exact location. It was no wonder why the old principal was only able to track the poison hall down to Jingyuan City. It was indeed really well hidden. Yes. An elder of the poison hall unintentionally leaked the news while he was purchasing something at our Inkcloud quarter a while back. Other than that, I really know nothing else other than that. Hu Yunqing said with a reddened face. Afflicted by the other party's poison, if he didn't receive the antidote soon, he could very well lose his life. However, he really didn't have the crucial information which the other party wanted to know. In truth, the news that the poison hall was located in the Viridian Cloud Sea could be considered to be completely useless. The Viridian Cloud Sea spanned over such a huge area, and it was teeming with countless saint beasts on top of that. Who could possibly have the strength and time to comb the entire area? Purchasing something at your Inkcloud quarter? Paying no heed to Hu Yunqing's worry, Zhang Xian frowned at the few other words that the other party said instead. What did the elder of the poison hall buy from you here? There was a 100-year-old sepulchre flower for sale in a previous auction we conducted. It is an extremely rare medicinal herb which serves as an excellent mediating factor in the concoction of many poisons, so it caught the attention of one of the elders of the poison hall. Eventually, he took it away at a very low price. Hu Yunxing said with a livid face. He had spent over 100 high-tier spirit stones in order to obtain the sepulchre flower, and he had expected to profit greatly from it, yet that poison hall elder actually poisoned more than a dozen of his subordinates, and even he himself was nearly afflicted as well. Left with no choice, he could only agree to selling it at a discounted price. It could be said that he had made a huge loss in that deal, and even a year's worth of profits wasn't sufficient for him to cover that loss. This was precisely reason why Cloud Quarter rarely dealt in medicinal herbs anymore. The risk was simply too great. If poison masters were to willfully steal their medicinal herbs, there was nothing they could do about it. Do you have any medicinal herbs that the poison hall will require in your Cloud Quarter? It will be best for it to have as high a maturity as possible so that it can lure their men over. After a moment of contemplation, Zhang Xian asked. Hu Yunxing might have been unaware of the location of the poison hall, but the elders of the poison hall themselves were bound to know. It was entirely possible to use a medicinal ingredient they required to lure them out of their dens. As long as one of them were to appear, he could subdue the other party and force him to lead him to the poison hall. This way, the problem would be solved. While his understanding of poison was still only equivalent to that of a 2-star poison master, he possessed Heaven's Path Shinchi, which could easily neutralize most poison. Even if a 7-star poison master were to appear before him, he had nothing to fear. But of course, anything beyond that could very well be beyond his means. Take the innate fetal poison for example, its ability to avert danger made it impossible for his Heaven's Path Shinchi to do anything to it. It was not without reason that the poison masters could instill deep fear in the hearts of the cultivators of the master-teacher continent. They did indeed possess capability and strength rivaling their reputation. Had it not been out of fear of the master-teacher pavilion, as well as the high difficulty and risk in pursuing the way of poison, there would indubitably have been a seat in the upper 9 paths for poison masters. Medicinal herbs that the poison hall requires? Understanding the other party's intention, an embarrassed look appeared on Hu Yunxing's face as he said, "Our Cloud Quarter hasn't taken in any medicinal herbs in recent years. Even if we do have a few, they are unlikely to be of much value and won't be sufficient to move the poison masters." After the setback that he had suffered, he got a clear glimpse into how fearsome poison masters were. As a result, he had made up his mind to steer clear of the medicinal herb business. Otherwise, if a few more of such robberies were to occur, wouldn't his Cloud Quarter go bankrupt? I see. Do you know what kind of medicinal herbs will be able to move the poison masters? Zhang Xian frowned. Based on what I know, the 7-star poison master examination requires one to concoct a poison capable of killing a Saint 2 Dan expert, and such poisons usually require the sepulchre flower. If anyone were to have a high maturity sepulchre flower, it will surely draw many poison masters in. Just that the sepulchre flower is an extremely rare medicinal herb. To tell you the truth, it was a huge stroke of luck that we were able to obtain it the last time. Hu Yunxing said. Sepulchre flower? Zhang Xian pondered for a moment before sighing deeply. Back during his inauguration ceremony, the saint beasts of the Cloud Mist Ridge did give him quite a lot of medicinal herbs. However, there didn't seem to be any sepulchre flowers amidst the pile. He also didn't recall seeing that medicinal herb amongst the various items he had collected thus far. It seemed like he would really have to go to some trouble to obtain the sepulchre flower. Since that's the case, I want you to make a public announcement saying that Cloud Quarter has recently obtained a 200-year-old sepulchre flower, and it will be auctioned very soon. It will do as long as we are able to draw the poison masters in. Zhang Xian said. His only goal was to lure the poison masters out, not to obtain a sepulchre flower. The most important thing he had to do at the moment was to draw the other party out. Everything else could be decided later on. This even so, I fear that things might not go as planned. If a poison master doesn't utilize any poison, there is no distinctive trait to tell him apart from an ordinary cultivator. If they were to realize that the news regarding auctioning the sepulchre flower is fake, they might not make a move, and there will be no way for us to confirm their identity. Hu Yunxing said with a bitter smile. Zhang Xian pondered for a moment before nodding, "You're right." Just like the soul oracles, poison masters were one of the most loathed occupations on the master-teacher continent. As such, they would rarely display their means publicly unless required, making it nigh impossible to identify them. He could only assess the information of a cultivator through the Library of Heaven's Path after he had used a battle technique, so it would be futile if the poison master didn't use any battle technique. On top of that, there would surely be many people who would be at the auction. Sieving an individual or two out of a huge crowd was no easy task. More importantly, if they were to abide by the rules and purchase the sepulchre flower through the normal bidding process, that would place us in a very bad position, Hu Yunxing continued. It was true that he was coerced to sell his sepulchre flower at a loss to a poison master the previous time, but that could have been considered as an exception rather than the norm. After all, it was not like the poison hall was a band of heinous villains. If the other party were to purchase the sepulchre flower honestly but they were unable to produce the medicinal herb, it probably wouldn't take long for the entire Ink Cloud quarter to be destroyed under the poison master's wrath. That's right. Zhang Xian rubbed his glabella in frustration. It seemed like his idea was not feasible. At that point, a thought came to Hu Yunxing, and he said hesitantly, "Actually, there might be no need for us to feign it. The sepulchre flower might be rare, but I just recalled a person who could very well have it, and the maturity is bound to exceed 100 years at that." "Oh. Who is it?" Hearing that someone had the sepulchre flower, Zhang Xian's eyes lit up. "I am not too sure what his name is, but he is a rather strange person. Everyone addresses him as eccentric old man. He is quite into herbology, and he has accumulated quite a few precious medicinal herbs. He also has quite a collection of artifacts as well. The sepulchre flower which I obtained the previous time around came from him. If you were to find him, you might be able to find another sepulchre flower," Hu Yunxing said. You're tuning in to the Blissful Bookshelf YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.